Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new. My name is Kristen, this is my booktube, and in today's video we are going to be doing something that is quite different for me, something that I have never really done before. This is going to be a fairly in-depth plot summary of Wuthering Heights. I have wanted to make several different plot breakdown videos before, but it is a big undertaking, so I've never actually done it before. But I figured since I did a reread of Wuthering Heights before the movie came out, and I have since seen the movie, it is a great time for me to actually try to make one of these videos. So yeah, today I'm going to be talking you through the entire plot of Wuthering Heights. I have 30 pages of notes in front of me right now and visual aids for all of the characters that are in the story. So that is why we are by this blank wall right now. So a little disclaimer before we get started. This is not a definitive summary. This is not meant to be used as like a study guide or anything like that. This is just a silly little plot summary video where I'm just going to talk you through what happens in the book. This is just my silly little interpretation of what goes on in this book because honestly, this book is absolutely unhinged and is far different from the movie that just came out. So even if you saw the movie, you don't really know what happens in the book because even the movie itself is really only based on like the first half of the book. So there's just so much that happens in the book that did not make it into the movie. So yeah, this is just my silly little interpretation of the plot of Wuthering Heights. I'm going to be making jokes. I may glaze over a couple things. I may leave some details out that I don't really think are that important. So don't flame me too hard, okay? I am just trying to make a silly little video. So yes, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this plot summary of Wuthering Heights. So just like a basic background of the book, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail. However, if you have the Penguin Classic version of this book, the introduction and the foreword and all of the stuff that's included at the beginning of this book, I found very interesting. So I do recommend reading that or reading any of the supplementary introduction chapters or whatever in the copy that you may have. It just really adds to the story in my opinion. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that are in there. I'm not going to really go into depth that much because that alone could be like a whole video by itself, honestly. So Wuthering Heights was published in 1847 by Emily Bronte, and it is her only novel, and she passed away shortly after it was published from tuberculosis. So Emily Bronte was one of like 6 children, I'm pretty sure. Emily's sisters, Anne and Charlotte, were also authors and have written some classic works themselves. And as far as I understand it, because I up until last week had never seen any Wuthering Heights adaptation. I had only read the book. It seems like there has yet to be any adaptation that is actually faithful to the book. Most seem to really lean into the romance side of the book, which brings us to this misconceived notion that the book itself is a bodice ripping romance, when really it's not. There's not really any explicitly sexual themes in this book, which you would be shocked by if you saw the recent movie, and I will talk about the movie at the end of this video. But the movies seem to really lean into that romantic aspect of the story and downplay a lot of the other themes. They also tend to only adapt the first volume of the book, which is essentially like the first half of the book. And when I found that out, I thought that was very interesting. I don't know why they do that, but in any case, that's how I guess we came to this point where people who haven't read the book and only see the movie see it as more of a romance than the people who have read the book and maybe not seen the movies or don't really like the adaptations that are out there. But I did find that interesting when I was reading the introduction of this book, so I wanted to include that. I have this whole section about capital R romanticism versus romance as we think of it today, but I'm not going to bore you with all of that information. Just know that when we call Wuthering Heights a romance, we're really talking about romanticism as a concept and less so a romance as you would think today, a la like Abby Jimenez or Emily Henry. It's not that kind of romance at all. So if you did see the movie and you're like, oh, I really want to pick up the book, just know that it is not a romance in the way that you think it is. It is a lot more tragic, it is a lot more chaotic, and very unhinged. So you're in for a roller coaster of a ride, just probably not the one that you expect if you go in thinking it is a straight up romance. So before we just jump on in with the plot of the video, I'm going to introduce you to the cast of characters, and we are going to be putting them up in kind of a family tree lineage style because that's going to make more sense as we get deeper into the story and it gets a little more chaotic. And all of the pictures that I'm using, I did find on a blog, and I will link the blog down below. I couldn't find the actual artists, but I hope it's okay that I'm using these pictures for this video. And if you know where I can credit these artists, please let me know. So the first person that we're gonna introduce is Mr. Earnshaw. So Mr. Earnshaw is the patriarch of the Earnshaw family, one of the two main families in this book. This is the family that owns Wuthering Heights. Next up, we have Mrs. Earnshaw. Now, some of these I just Googled like 18th century lord and lady or whatever. So for the older generations, we don't really have much in the way of like fan fiction type drawings, at least not from what I saw. So this is going to represent Mrs. Earnshaw. Then Mr. and Mrs. Earnshaw have two biological children. They are Hindley and Catherine, or as I will probably end up calling her a lot, Kathy. So this is what makes up the Earnshaw family, the people that are living at Wuthering Heights. And then the other family that is the main focus of the story is the Linton family, who live about 4 miles away at an estate called Thrushcross Grange. But I'm going to be honest, Thrushcross is a little bit of a tongue twister for me, so I will just be calling it the Grange. So anytime you hear me say the Grange, I mean Thrushcross Grange. I just, for some reason, can't say that without all of the letters in the middle getting mushed together. So the Grange is just easier for all of us, honestly. And Mr. and Mrs. Linton really aren't in the story all that much. So I did my thing and I just Googled Lord and Lady in 18th century England. And these are some of the pictures that came up. So this is what they're going to look like on this little family tree. Alrighty. And then the Lintons also have 2 children, and they are Edgar Linton and Isabella Linton. Then in addition to these 2 families, we have the people that are working at Wuthering Heights. And first up, we have Nellie, who ends up being our main narrator through the entire book for the most part. Now, Nellie has worked at Wuthering Heights for a very long time, and she has been with the Earnshaw children basically since she was a child. She was like a playmate for the children, and then she eventually, as they grew up, became one of the housemaids. I don't remember exactly how that happens, and I don't remember if we talk about it in the book or not, but in any case, Nellie is basically with the Earnshaws from the very beginning of this entire story. So she is a very important character in this book. Then also working at Wuthering Heights, we have Joseph, who, again, I couldn't really find a great picture for him, so I just Googled 18th century farmer, and this is what came up. Joseph is a very old and very religious man. It is emphasized a lot that he is a very old man, which also makes me laugh at the fact that in the new movie that he is a young, promiscuous man, but nonetheless, that's not what we're here to talk about right now. And the last servant that is a big part of the story that actually doesn't come into the story until later, but I'm just going to go ahead and put her up there anyway, is Zilla. Once again, couldn't find a great picture, so this is just 18th century maid. Then, of course, I could not talk about Wuthering Heights without talking about Heathcliff. I mean, we'll get into it in a bit, but I really don't like this man on so many levels. So we're going to have some fun talking about him as he becomes the worst character in this book. But he is the Earnshaw's adopted son. So he is not their biological son, but they do take him in as a child, and he does become basically one of their children. Alrighty, and the last character that we're going to introduce before we get into volume 1 is who is essentially our main character in this book. Without him, we would not have this story, and it is Lockwood. So Lockwood is the resident that is staying at the Grange at the very beginning of the book. And he is the one that kicks off this entire story where we get all of the dirt on Kathy, Heathcliff, the Earnshaws, the Lintons, all of that. So he is a quite important character in this story. Alrighty, so this is our cast of characters as of right now. Don't know if this organization is going to work out well, but if we need to move stuff, we'll just move it later. But for now, this is how we're setting it up. And fear not, I'm not just drawing lines on my wall. I put tape and then I drew on top of the tape. So I'm not just drawing with Sharpies on my walls. Please don't yell at me or have a fit in the comments about that. So now we can go ahead and jump into the story, and I actually have a little laser pointer so I can be pointing at the characters that I'm talking about. Hopefully you can see it. So yeah, our story starts out, as I mentioned, with Lockwood. Story opens, it's 1801. We're in the point of view of Mr. Lockwood. He is a tenant at Thrushcross Grange, which is located in the moors of Yorkshire, in the north of England. When we join him, he has just returned from a visit with his landlord, Heathcliff, who resides nearby at Wuthering Heights. On this visit, Lockwood arrives and he introduces himself to Heathcliff. Heathcliff sends Lockwood's horse with Joseph, who Lockwood takes the time to tell us is an old man. Like, he emphasizes that he is extremely old, not elderly, old. So we really don't know how old he is, but it seems like he's an old man through the entirety of this story, and it spans almost 30 years. So he's old. So Heathcliff tells Joseph to take Lockwood's horse and bring them some wine. Lockwood then takes this opportunity to tell us a little bit about why Wuthering Heights has the name it does. He says that wuthering is an adjective that describes the atmospheric tumult to which its station is exposed in stormy weather. So right off the bat, we get this idea of tumultuous weather, maybe a bit dangerous. It really sets up the vibe for this book. We have a lot of bad storms that happen, both emotionally, in relationships, and also literally outside. While describing the house, Lockwood mentions that there are these big high-back chairs that are painted green. And just as a little aside, I thought this was very interesting because of the way that green dyes used to be made and how they used to contain poisons like arsenic. And this is not something that Emily Bronte would have been aware of because I believe it was still happening when she wrote this book. I don't think they really stopped doing that until like the 1900s. I could be wrong on that. I'm not like a fashion historian. I don't know a ton about the history of poisons, but I do think that arsenic was still like a big component in green dyes, green clothing, things like that in the time that Emily Bronte was writing this book. So I just think it's interesting that she straight up mentions the interiors and the decorations and everything being this shade of green, just given what we know now about how those green dyes were made. Then on page 5, we get our first like actual description of Heathcliff, and he's described as dark-skinned. And they throw around a lot of potential ethnicities throughout this book of like where he could potentially be from because no one really knows. They literally say everything from Romani to potentially Chinese to Indian to Spanish. Like, they really can't tell where he comes from, just that he is not white. And this is a very important part of the book, and this is also a part of the new movie that people got very upset about because Heathcliff's race is a very central part of this book and very central to the way that he is treated by the people around him. It is referenced throughout the book. It's not really something that is just, said at the beginning and then it doesn't really come back into play. It is something that we're constantly reminded of throughout the book, that he is distinctly not white. So after their first meeting, Lockwood is very interested in Heathcliff. He was not nice to him in any way, shape, or form. He was not playing host, really. And for some reason that intrigues Lockwood, and he decides that he wants to go back the next day, even though Heathcliff straight up told him not to come back. And so naturally, he does show up the next day, even though Heathcliff told him that he does not want him to come back to his house. And once he gets to Wuthering Heights, everyone is rude to him. He finds Joseph outside. He asks if he can meet with Heathcliff. He says no and just kind of leaves. And then Lockwood sees this young man coming from the fields, and he assumes that he works at the Heights, and so he asks him if he can come inside. And the young man does bring him inside and brings him to a sitting room where a young woman is already hanging out. This young woman is also named Catherine, and she is the daughter of the other Catherine. So in order to avoid confusion from here on out, we're going to be calling this Catherine Catherine/Kathy. And this Catherine is going to be Kathy Jr. or CJ for short, just so we're clear on who's who when it comes to these two. So yeah, Lockwood is brought in to the living room where Kathy Jr. is hanging out. She kind of just ignores his existence entirely until he comments on the dog that is also in the room that they're in, and she just kind of scoffs and says that it's not her dog. Then Lockwood, trying to make conversation, notices that there looks to be a cat on another chair. So he asks her if she's more of a cat person, motioning to this lump of fur on this chair, only for her to respond very scornfully, and he realizes that it's actually a pile of dead rabbits. So if that's not a sign that you should vacate the premise immediately and that this is not a house that you really want to hang out in, I don't know what is, but for some reason Lockwood decides to stay. Kathy Jr. reinforces this idea by telling him that he shouldn't have come to Wuthering Heights to begin with. He then tries to help her with some canisters that she's trying to pick up from the fireplace, and she gets real sassy, saying that she doesn't need his help. And then frustrated, she asks if he was invited to tea, or she's basically like, why are you here? And Lockwood is like, no, I wasn't invited, but I would like some tea if you're having some. And right about this time is when Heathcliff enters the room. What a joy. And he immediately chastises Lockwood for trudging through the moors to get over to Wuthering Heights from the Grange. As I mentioned, it's not a short walk. It is 4 miles through the moors. And as Heathcliff tells him, the moors can be very dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. They can be like kind of boggy and you can get like stuck and lost and things like that. So he basically says that he's dumb for coming back. Oh, I forgot to mention at this point it is also snowing, so that also adds to the dangerousness of the moors themselves. Then Lockwood asks Heathcliff if he could guide him back to the Grange, to which Heathcliff just like flat out says no. So at this point, Lockwood's kind of SOL with getting help to get back to the Grange. Kathy Jr. then asks if she should serve Lockwood some tea, and ever the charmer, Heathcliff yells at her for not having the tea ready already. And this is really Lockwood's first glimpse at how Heathcliff treats the people around him. Yet he's still trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. But the thing about Heathcliff is that he's horrible. And I will be reiterating that throughout this whole video. This man, evil. I don't think there is another character in literature that I have hated more than Heathcliff. And this is just Lockwood's first glimpse. It is the tip of the iceberg of what Heathcliff does to the people around him. It is at this point that Lockwood realizes that no one's really happy at Wuthering Heights. They're all just kind of sad and depressed. Even Heathcliff is miserable. Even though he seems to be the source of a lot of the misery within the house, he is also miserable himself. Lockwood even says he can't believe that it's like this all the time, so he's even still trying to rationalize it, kinda, and be like, there's no way they're this depressed all the time, right? No, they are 100%. It's just that bad over there. Then trying to make conversation, Lockwood once again puts his foot in his mouth, and he asks if Kathy Jr. is Heathcliff's wife, to which Heathcliff gets very angry. Oh, I forgot to put the little farmhand kid up here. Then, thinking that he cracked the code, he then assumes that Kathy Jr. is married to the farmhand that he met earlier. This is also wrong. These two are not married. No one in this house is married at this point in time, but Lockwood he's trying to force relationships here where there just aren't. I don't know why he can't fathom that no one is married to Kathy Jr. in this household. Probably because he has like a crush on her. He does mention that she's like really pretty and stuff like that. He even says something at one point about how like, I think it's when he thinks that they're married, and he says something along the lines of, oh, I bet I'm making her sad about her decisions or something like that. Like basically calling him ugly because he thinks that he's so much better looking that she's going to regret that she's married to him. Very conceited thoughts, honestly. But that's not even what's happening here. So he's just like in his own world, really. I basically have written in my notes that Lockwood's way of thinking is that it's not so much that he thinks that he's really hot. He just thinks that he is really ugly and that she's way too good for him, basically. Heathcliff then tells Lockwood that Kathy Jr. is actually his daughter-in-law. And then he looks at her with hatred in his eyes. I mean, I know people have like in-law issues and stuff, but like this animosity, it's on a whole nother level, and we will get there, trust me. So as they're having this exchange, the snow that was happening outside when Lockwood got here gets significantly worse, to the point where Lockwood is not able to return to the Grange. He tries to ask Heathcliff one more time if he will guide him back to the Grange, to which Heathcliff just says no again. And at this point, he just leaves the room. Like he's so done with Lockwood at this point. Lockwood then asks Kathy Jr. if she knows how to get back to the Grange from here, to which she just says, go back the way you came. Super helpful there, CJ. So glad that we have you on the team. And with no one who is able or willing to guide him back to the Grange, Lockwood ends up staying the night at Wuthering Heights. Heathcliff tells him that his sleeping options are essentially share a room with the farm boy, who we now know is named Hareton, or he can share a room with Joseph, the old religious man. Lockwood tries to be like, I'll just sleep in a chair. It's really not that big of a deal. I can just curl up right here and be fine. To which Heathcliff says there ain't no way I'm letting you roam around my house at night when I can't keep an eye on you. Which, like, I kind of understand, but also it just kind of feeds into his general controlling behavior, so we don't like that. At least I don't. And then he calls Lockwood an unmannerly wretch, which I think is just very funny, honestly. He does have some good, like, quips, I will say. Some of the things that he says would be very funny if it was literally anyone else but him that were saying it. I just can't like this person, so anything that comes out of his mouth, I'm not a fan of. Even if it is objectively funny, like calling Lockwood an unmannerly wretch for asking if he can just sleep on the couch. This is also just a general aside, but in these first couple chapters, it also seems like Joseph is very much convinced that Kathy Jr. is a witch. And instead of like trying to say she's not or whatever, she just kind of leans into it and she tells him to like leave her alone and don't make her mad or else she will like summon the devil and hex him and things like that. So I just think that's very funny, especially with how religious Joseph is. Like Joseph is not playing around. He calls her like a saucy witch several times and she just plays into it and like really stokes those religious fears that he has surrounding her and her potential witchiness. Anyways, back to our main story. So Heathcliff calls Lockwood an unmannerly wretch, says that he can either sleep with Joseph or Hareton, and that he cannot sleep on the couch or anywhere else because he does not want him roaming the halls while Heathcliff is asleep. This makes Lockwood feel slighted, and he decides that he doesn't want to stay there anymore. So he just takes off into the snow on foot to go find his way back to the Grange on his own. Heathcliff doesn't really care when this happens, even though he knows how dangerous the moors are without snow, let alone in the middle of a heavy snowstorm. But Kathy Jr. ends up saying that she hopes that if he dies, that Lockwood's ghost haunts him forever and that he will never have a tenant at the Grange again if he lets Lockwood die. And once again, Joseph thinks that this is Kathy being a little witchy and trying to curse Heathcliff because she's like wishing all of these things upon him if he does not go and help Lockwood. After Lockwood storms out, he finds a lantern and tells Joseph that he will return the lantern in the morning. And Joseph literally tries to sick dogs on him, but he says that the dogs are just more into like stretching their paws and yawning than to actually chase after him and devour him alive. So nothing really happens to Lockwood when Joseph sicks the dogs on him. And all of that just kind of makes Heathcliff laugh, while Lockwood is now raging and very embarrassed about this whole encounter, and straight up says that he is full of wrath. Lockwood is then brought back to Wuthering Heights, and Scylla brings him to an empty room that he can sleep in. Now remember, Heathcliff had said that there were no available rooms, that all of the rooms were taken, and the only places that he could sleep were with Joseph or Hareton. Turns out there is an empty room in this house. For some reason, Heathcliff just didn't want anyone to sleep in it. So since Heathcliff straight up said that there are no available rooms, Scylla tells Lockwood to be very quiet because Heathcliff has gone to bed and they don't want to disturb him and have him find out that Scylla is giving him an actual bed to sleep in of his own. So Lockwood makes it into the room, he locks his door for the evening, and he starts just kind of looking around the room, and he notices that there is a table with the names Catherine Earnshaw, Catherine Heathcliff, and Catherine Linton all scratched into the paint. He then kind of looks around the room a bit, checks out some of the books, and he starts to fall asleep. And he is awakened by the smell of burning calf skin because he let his candle burn down too much and the wick like fell on one of the books that is made of leather. So that smell woke him up. And then he takes a look at the books that were affected by the candle. And he sees that the inside has an inscription of Catherine Earnshaw with a date that is 25 years prior to the current date. And that would be like 1776, funny enough. He looks through these books and sees that the previous owner has scribbled all over them. There are just writings in the margins, doodles all over the place, and there's even what he describes as a pretty good caricature of Joseph on one of the blank pages. He says that all of these drawings are done in a childish hand, letting us know that Kathy was pretty young when she did these drawings. Based on the dating, she should be about 11 in 1776. So yeah, she was a child drawing in her books as children like to do. Some things don't change, honestly. He then goes on to read more of Catherine's writings where she starts to talk about Hindley being a tyrant in the house and how mean he is after the passing of his father. So keep in mind, we're in the times of primogeniture. When the father passes away, The son inherits the estate. He's also the oldest. He's like 7 years older than Kathy. So he becomes the head of the house. And he is not a very nice head of house, we'll say for now. We'll get into more of that later. In these writings, Kathy says that Hindley lives a life of paradise, while Kathy and Heathcliff are forced to attend makeshift mass that is put on by our resident religious man, Joseph, and that Hindley does not like their playing in the house. Keep in mind, based on the dates of when their father passes away, Kathy's about 12, which makes Heathcliff about 13. So they are straight up children. They like to play, okay? That's what children do. Throughout history, children like to play. So this kind of gives Lockwood an idea of what the dynamic between the three of them is like, and that it wasn't really a great family dynamic, to say the least. Then Lockwood falls back asleep and he has this dream about this sermon that he read in one of the books. It has to do with this sermon 70 times 7 that thematically relates to forgiveness, but I'm not going to go into depth about this sermon or anything like that. I did find an article about it, but this video is going to be long enough without me going off on tangents like that. So if you want to look it up, just Google 70 times 7 Wuthering Heights and you'll find plenty of stuff to tell you more about what that is and why it's in the book. So when he's having this dream, Lockwood is then awoken by the sound of branches scraping on the tree outside of the room that he is staying in. And from what I understand, I'm pretty sure he falls back asleep and that this next part is another dream, but then it also kind of goes into reality. So I don't know if he's supposed to be sleepwalking and acting out his dream or whatnot. But from what I understand, Lockwood falls back asleep and has a second nightmare where he punches out the window to get the tree branch to stop knocking on the window. But when he does so, he finds that it's not a tree branch. It is actually the cold, childish hand of Kathy. And I'm not entirely sure if he means childlike as in the age she was in the writings that he was reading, or if this is you know how in the Victorian era they would just kind of call young women children even if they were 20 or something like that. It could also be that, so I don't really know, but he does describe it as an icy cold hand of a child either way. So it's freaky nonetheless because Kathy's dead at this point. So this icy cold hand of Kathy latches on to Lockwood's arm and she starts begging him to let her in. She says that she got lost in the moors and that's why she has been away from home. And she has an iron-like grip and will not let go of Lockwood's arm. So much so that Lockwood starts deliberately rubbing her arm on the cut pieces of glass on the window and she starts bleeding and she still won't let go of him. It is a very scary visual, honestly. I would be terrified if something like that happened to me in a dream or in real life. It doesn't really matter. It's horrifying either way. He does convince her to let him go by saying that he can't let her in if she doesn't let go of his arm. Physically, he just can't do it if she doesn't let go of him. So that convinces her to let him go. And what he does is he takes all of the books that he was looking at before and stacks them in a pyramid and pushes them up against the hole in the glass. That's gonna do anything. Literally anyone could push that stack of books over, but that's what he goes with in the end. And he just kind of ignores her wailing. She just stands outside and starts screaming about how she wants to be let in, how she needs to be let in, and he just tries to ignore it to the best of his ability. Then all of a sudden the pile of books gets thrusted forward, and this is when Lockwood lets out a scream. And this scream pretty much alerts the entire house, but most importantly, it alerts Heathcliff. So Heathcliff comes running into the room, seemingly thinking that he himself has heard Kathy's ghost, and he is shocked to see Lockwood in there, first of all. Heathcliff then gets angry that Lockwood is in this room and asks him, who the heck let you in here? And he does not hesitate to tell him that it was Scylla. Scylla let him in there. So Lockwood's kind of a snitch. I mean, to be fair, he doesn't know at this point how bad Heathcliff is, but he wastes no time giving Scylla up to Heathcliff as the person who let him into this room. Heathcliff then sends Lockwood out of the room and tells him to just kind of meander the halls. Mind you, at this point it is 3 a.m. Even though Heathcliff says that the house rises at 4, 3 a.m. is still a crazy time to just be yeah, you can just go walk around the house. Just don't come back in here. But nonetheless, that's exactly what Lockwood does. He leaves the room. And as he is leaving, he hears/sees Heathcliff run over to the window and start yelling for Kathy's ghost to come back. Now, Heathcliff said that he would come meet Lockwood in a few minutes. He has no intention of doing that. Lockwood kind of just starts wandering around the house and he ends up in the kitchen. And he sits by the hearth with a gray cat until Joseph comes down from a hatch in the ceiling. It's called a garret and it's like his little apartment, but I just think it's funny to imagine him just kind of like descending from the ceiling as Lockwood is sitting by the fire. Joseph then comes and sits in front of the fire as well and begins smoking his pipe and smokes his entire pipe without saying a word to Lockwood. I don't really know why Joseph and Lockwood have like this beef, but like Joseph has not been nice to Lockwood this entire time. And it could just be that Joseph is a crotchety old man at this point. He very much is, but I don't know if that's his specific motivation in this instance. But nonetheless, Joseph finishes smoking his pipe and then he just leaves without saying a word. And after Joseph leaves, Hareton then comes into the room. And then Lockwood says that he thinks about saying good morning and then he sees that it's Hareton and changes his mind. So once again, I don't know what the beef is here, but for some reason Lockwood just doesn't like Hareton. Hareton just kind of minds his own business. He's looking for a shovel to like shovel some of the snow that fell overnight. And when he gets the shovel and he goes to leave, Lockwood just starts following him. So he won't say good morning to Hareton, but he will follow him out into the field when he's about to go shovel snow. I don't understand why he does that, but that's what he does. Hareton then notices that Lockwood is following him, and again, without saying a word, he kind of just motions to a door with the shovel that he's carrying, silently communicating to Lockwood that if he wants somewhere else to go, he should go in that room. So he does, and inside of that room, he finds Kathy Jr. and Scylla already sitting in the room. Mind you, it is like 4 a.m. at this point. And Heathcliff is in there too, and as Lockwood enters the room, Heathcliff is verbally berating Kathy Jr., essentially telling her that she is lazy, she does nothing to earn her keep, she relies on his charity, which I think is just hilarious because Heathcliff and charity should not be in the same universe, let alone the same sentence. And then Heathcliff goes to hit Kathy Jr. and she kind of dodges it like she's done that before, like it's a regular occurrence in this household that he takes a swing at her, and she ends up like running off to the other side of the room where she's essentially out of his reach. And Heathcliff, noticing that they're no longer alone, just kind of like shoves his hands in his pockets and pretends like he didn't just try to hit Kathy in front of Lockwood. Like, what? Like, sir, you know that he is roaming around the halls. That's exactly what you told him to do. There is a non-zero chance that you will end up in the same room with him at some point. You can't just control your anger for a little bit and not hit a child, like a literal child. Because at this point, I'm pretty sure Kathy Jr. is like 17 or something like that. She is a child, like literally. After seeing this, Lockwood declines to stay for breakfast and starts heading back to the Grange on his own. Heathcliff basically yells at him to stop before reaching the end of the garden and finally offers to guide him back to the Grange. Why he's willing to help now and he wasn't 24 hours earlier, I don't fully understand. But nonetheless, he is now offering to help Lockwood get back to the Grange. And once he makes it back to the Grange, the staff there start fussing over him because they thought that he died in the snowstorm because he never made it back the night before. So yeah, they're really happy that he's not dead. And now that he's back at the Grange, he starts talking to Nellie about Wuthering Heights. And this is where our story starts to kick off, because it is after this whole experience that just happened that Lockwood decides to ask Nellie, so what's the deal with this Heathcliff guy? So the first thing that Lockwood asks is why he stays at Wuthering Heights. It is objectively a worse house, a worse property. It's very dark and dingy, and the Grange is just overall a nicer house to live in. And Lockwood kind of implies that maybe Heathcliff doesn't have a lot of money, and that's why Wuthering Heights is in the state that it's in, because it can't really afford to keep up with it. This makes Nellie scoff, and she basically tells him that Heathcliff has a ton of money. We have no idea where he got it from, but every year it increases. And he basically just rents out the Grange because he's greedy and he wants more money. And I once proclaimed after my first time reading this book that I'm pretty sure that Heathcliff got all his money by swindling old ladies with like different cons. In my headcanon, he was doing like Nigerian prince schemes like back in the 1780s. But we don't know. No one knows how Heathcliff made any of his money. So your guess is as good as mine, and that's the one that I like to go with because I mean, look at that face. That's a face not even a mother could love. That's so mean. I shouldn't say that. But I don't like him. Don't like him at all. so it's hard for me to be nice. Nellie describes Heathcliff as rough as a saw edge and hard as a whinstone. The less you meddle with him, the better. And then this is when Lockwood asks, so what's the deal with Heathcliff then? If he's got money, if he chooses to live in this nasty house, what is his deal? Why does he choose to be this way? And Nellie basically grabs her sewing, sits down and says, how much time you got? And she proceeds to just spill all of the tea about the history of Heathcliff. Because remember, I told you, Nellie's been here since the beginning. Nellie was there the day that Mr. Earnshaw brought Heathcliff into their home. She was there when this demon was unleashed upon the moors of Yorkshire, okay? This woman is a wealth of knowledge, and we love her for being willing to spill all of the tea because it is a crazy, crazy ride. By this point, Lockwood has now caught a cold, so it's the perfect time for him to be just laying in bed listening to Nellie tell him stories too. So he is like locked in. He is sick in bed. Nellie's got her sewing. This is like him watching reality television while he's sick. Lockwood starts by asking about the family dynamics, and Nellie starts letting him in on who is related to who and how this family tree breaks down. And this is where the narration shifts from Lockwood's point of view to Nellie's point of view. And we are in Nellie's point of view for most of the book. We jump out of it when she is done telling bits of her story to check back in with Lockwood. But majority of this story takes place through Nellie's storytelling. She tells him that she has worked for the Earnshaws since she, Kathy, and Hindley were all children. She tells him that they grew up together, they played together, and that she was there the day that Heathcliff was brought to Wuthering Heights. And she starts by talking about Mr. Earnshaw specifically. And one day when the children are young, I believe Kathy's about like 6 or 7, something like that. And that would make Hindley like 13 or so. Mr. Earnshaw tells them that he's going on a business trip to Liverpool. It is 60 miles away. And this man says that he is walking both ways, which is absolutely crazy to me. But apparently they did not have a horse. So walking was his mode of transportation. Fair enough, I guess. But before he leaves, he asks each of the children, as well as Nellie, what they want for a souvenir when he comes back. Hindley asks for a fiddle. Kathy asks for a horse whip. Don't know why she wants that if they don't have horses, but she wants a horse whip. And Nellie asks for pears and apples. And she makes a note to talk about how Mr. Earnshaw is a very nice man, for the most part. She says that he has his moments where he can be very severe, but for the most part, he is a very nice man. And she appreciates that he includes her in stuff like this, even though she is not one of his children. And for all intents and purposes, she is a servant for them. She's basically like a paid playmate for these two. Mr. Earnshaw then sets out for Liverpool, and he is gone for 3 days. He returns very late on the 3rd day and brings with him a small child who he has named Heathcliff, after a son that the two of them had who died in childhood. He does not get to have the Earnshaw last name. He's not like officially adopted or anything like that. So he just has one name. It's just Heathcliff. Like Cher, like Madonna, it's just Heathcliff. The children, Nellie included, gather around looking at Heathcliff because what the heck, the head of the household just came back from a business trip to a city with a whole child, not talking to his wife about it. He just brings the kid home and is like, hey, this is our new child. His name is Heathcliff. The children then ask their father for their gifts, and he has managed to lose them all on the way back home. The fiddle is smashed to pieces. He says that he lost the whip along the way, and I believe it's the same with the apples and pears as well. So the only thing that he came back with was Heathcliff. Heathcliff is very dirty and he does not speak to anyone. Kathy, being upset about not getting her gift, spits on him. So that sets up a great start to their relationship. In the meantime, Mr. Earnshaw is trying to explain to his wife why he brought a random child home. And she's like, what the heck? Why did you just decide to bring a kid home? And Mr. Earnshaw tells his wife that while he was walking in the streets of Liverpool, he saw this really sad, desolate looking child on the street. He said that he was starving and he inquired about an owner for him, like he was a dog, like he was a stray dog on the side of the road. And when he couldn't find anyone that would claim him, I guess. He decides that he's just going to bring Heathcliff home with him, and that's going to be his new child. And specifically, the way that he talks about Heathcliff as a child and how it's very similar to how you would talk about a dog, coupled with the way that he speaks about the color of his skin, also shows you that even though he does care about Heathcliff and he does really like Heathcliff, he does not see him as on par with his children. And I have to believe that that has a lot to do with his racial ambiguity, because why else would you be using dehumanizing language like that? And it really just hammers home how his racial ambiguity is very central to his experiences from the moment that he shows up in this book. Yeah, so as I mentioned, Kathy being upset that she didn't get her horsewhip for a horse that she doesn't own, ends up spitting on Heathcliff, and none of the other children really like him either. I feel like they could just kind of sense that he had bad vibes to begin with, but none of the children like him at first. And for some, that does not change. Over time, Kathy does grow to like Heathcliff. They start hanging out more. They start playing more. Hindley is devout in his hatred for Heathcliff. He does not like him from the second that he shows up. And the closer that Heathcliff gets with his dad, it just makes Hindley hate him more. Nellie admits that she also did not like Heathcliff at the beginning and tells Lockwood that Mrs. Earnshaw did not like him either. So early on, the only people that really liked Heathcliff were Mr. Earnshaw and Kathy. Even Kathy took a moment to come around, but for a while, Mr. Earnshaw was the only person in Wuthering Heights that actually liked Heathcliff. Everyone else did not like him. Mr. Earnshaw liked Heathcliff so much that when Hindley would pick on Heathcliff and bully him and be mean to him, if Mr. Earnshaw found out about it, he would be furious. And as time goes on, it is noted that Mr. Earnshaw grows to like Heathcliff more than either of his biological children. He does not like Hindley's tendency to be mean to Heathcliff and how he abuses him. And they say that Kathy is far too mischievous in nature to be her father's favorite. So Heathcliff comes out on top in the eyes of Mr. Earnshaw. I don't know what Mr. Earnshaw saw in this child, but he really likes him for some reason, which, as I mentioned, only fuels Hindley's hatred for Heathcliff. Nellie then tells us that only about 2 years after Heathcliff's arrival, Mrs. Earnshaw passes away, and this really deepens Hindley's disdain for Heathcliff because now his only surviving parent likes Heathcliff more than him. So Hindley now sees Heathcliff as a usurper of his parents' affection and all of his privileges. After this, all of the children get measles, and Nellie is basically forced to grow up very quickly. She becomes their nurse, essentially. And as she is nursing Heathcliff, she begins to kind of soften towards him. So at this point, Nellie is kind of coming around to liking Heathcliff a little bit, and she kind of sympathizes with him, at least for a little bit. So at this point in time, Heathcliff is about 9, Kathy is about 8, and Hindley is about 16.
Hello, editing Kristen here. Just wanted to say, because I didn't catch this when I was filming it, but being 16 and beefing with a 9-year-old is crazy. Like, that's insane. Anyways, I just wanted to throw that in there because what? I said that and then I just blew right past it and I was like, no. I gotta comment on this because that's wild.
And Nellie does say that part of the reason why she softens to Heathcliff is because of how quiet he was when he was really sick with the measles, because she said that these two just kind of annoyed the hell out of her when she was trying to take care of them. They were just really whiny, and says that they like harassed her while she was caring for them. But Heathcliff was just kind of quiet. She did say that he was like the worst off out of all of them, so maybe he was just too sick to really be a terror at that point. But in any case, that's what makes her soften to him a little bit. All the children end up pulling through, and the doctor tells Nellie that she did a great job specifically with Heathcliff because he was in such a bad way, and that he probably would not have survived if it wasn't for her care. I was gonna say missed opportunity there, but I don't want to be that mean. And even at this point, when Nellie is softening towards Heathcliff, she still is questioning why the heck Mr. Earnshaw likes him so much. And we don't really get an answer for that, just for some reason, he really likes Heathcliff. And now that Nellie has softened towards him, Kathy is now his friend, his mother is dead, Hindley is alone in his hatred for Heathcliff. Nellie then tells a story about Mr. Earnshaw bringing home some horses for Hindley and Heathcliff, and Heathcliff takes the prettier one of the two, but the problem is the pretty one soon fell lame, and so Heathcliff basically blackmails Hindley to give him his horse, or else Heathcliff will tell his father about all of the abuses that Hindley puts him through. They have a bit of a fight, which leads to Hindley basically just giving up and giving him the horse, but not before calling him an imp of Satan, which I think is a very good insult for Heathcliff. And he also throws in that he hopes that the horse breaks Heathcliff's neck or kicks his brains out. Hindley is a true hater, and honestly, when it comes to Heathcliff, I kind of respect it. Nellie then ends this chapter with this gem of a quote where she says of Heathcliff that he complained so seldom indeed of such stirs as these that I really thought him not vindictive. I was deceived completely, as you will hear. Really setting us up for the absolute chaos that Heathcliff is about to put everyone in his life through. And also really showing why Nellie is one of my favorite characters in this book. I really love Nellie. I think that she is so funny, such a good storyteller in this book. I would sit and gossip with her all day. So now Nellie skips forward about 3 years in her narrative. Mr. Earnshaw has now fallen ill, and it has become abundantly clear to everyone that Heathcliff is his favorite of the children. And this causes Heathcliff to get a big ego, which in turn makes Hindley more vindictive and resentful. So we got some tension really building within this house. I mean, look at that face. He is not a happy man. During this time, it's suggested that Hindley be sent off to university, and Mr. Earnshaw agrees, and Hindley leaves Wuthering Heights and goes off to university. And Nellie says that with Hindley gone, she hopes that that will bring some peace to the house. Because remember, at this point, it's really just these two that hate each other. So if you take him out of the equation, then even though Heathcliff's not great, you don't have the animosity between these two plaguing the house every single day. Nellie then takes this opportunity to talk about Kathy specifically and how annoying she thinks she is. She says that she is very tiresome and that she was always getting into mischief and would get annoyed if people would not join her in whatever mischievous plot she has going on. But Nellie says she's real pretty and she doesn't think that she means any harm by the things that she does. She's a teenager, so she's really just being like a very annoying teenager. She also says that at this point in time, with Hindley out of the house at university, that this is when Kathy and Heathcliff really grow close and form their bond. So much so that Nellie says that if you need to punish Kathy, the most effective punishment that you can dish unto her is to separate her from Heathcliff. This is a quote that I just think is kind of funny, but at one point Mr. Earnshaw asks Kathy why she can't just be a good girl. And Kathy quips back with, well, why can't you just be a good man? This does make him a bit angry, and then she kind of like calms him down afterwards. Then one evening they are sitting in the parlor. Mr. Earnshaw is sitting in a chair. Kathy is kind of like sitting at his feet, like leaning her head against his leg, and he is like stroking her hair. And this is after her comment about why can't you just be a good man. She decides to sing him to sleep in the chair that he's sitting in. And after a little bit, Joseph says that he needs to take Mr. Earnshaw upstairs so that he can say his prayers and go to bed. But Nellie senses that something's not quite right. So she tries to get Heathcliff and Kathy to go upstairs so that she can kind of like assess the situation, if you will. But Kathy, being a stubborn teenager, says that she will not go to bed until she tells her father goodnight. She goes to give him a hug, and she realizes that he has passed away in his sleep in the chair. She then starts screaming and yelling to Heathcliff that Mr. Earnshaw has passed away. They both start crying. Nellie starts crying. I don't think Joseph cries, but these three, they're wailing up a storm. After the death of Mr. Earnshaw, Hindley returns to Wuthering Heights to, 1, attend the funeral, and then 2, to take up his position as master of the house. And when he returns, he is not only changed from the university experience that he has had for the last couple years, but he also returns with a wife. Her name is Frances, and Nellie makes it a point to tell us that Hindley doesn't really tell them anything about Frances, not where she's from, what her background is, So Nellie takes that to mean that she had no money or a family name that was worth noting, and saying that she's pretty sure that that's why Hindley did not tell his father that he got married, because he probably wouldn't have approved of Frances as a wife for him. But now that Mr. Earnshaw is not around anymore, it doesn't really matter. So Hindley comes back with Frances, and he also comes back with a bit of a personality change too. As we've talked about before, the way that Mr. Earnshaw ran Wuthering Heights, there wasn't a big distinction between the people that worked at Wuthering Heights and the family of the house. Nellie has always been close with Hindley, Kathy, Heathcliff, Mr. Earnshaw, and she's really the best example of those lines being blurred. But when Hindley returns from university, he is like, we're not doing that anymore. If you are a servant, you're going to be treated like a servant. He tells Joseph to move into the garret that he is living in when we were with Lockwood a bit earlier. And he also tells Nellie and Joseph that they are going to be dining in the kitchen by themselves and that they are no longer allowed to dine with the family. And in this division between staff and family, Hindley also includes Heathcliff. Now that Mr. Earnshaw is no longer around, Hindley tells Heathcliff that he is not blood related, he is not an Earnshaw, and therefore he basically makes him into a stable boy. And for an age check at this point, I believe that Hindley is about 20, Kathy is about 12, and Heathcliff is about 13. These ages are never really stated in the book, so this is just me taking context clues to kind of fill you in on the ages of these characters, because I feel like that's also a very important thing to know when you read about some of the things that they do, like the way that Kathy acts. If you think about it as like a whole adult doing it, she sounds like one of the most annoying people. But when you take into account that she's like 12, her being annoying makes a lot more sense, because, you know, sometimes children just be annoying like that, you know? So anytime that I give an age update, it's usually because there is an event that I can tie back to a birth or a death in the family tree, and then I kind of just extrapolate from there to figure out how old everyone is at any given time. And some people we don't have birthdays for. Like, I have no idea how old Frances is. We do not have a birth year on the family tree in the book. We just have the year that she died. And like Nellie, Joseph, Scylla, Lockwood, none of them are on the family tree, obviously, because they're not part of the family. So I have no idea how old these people are. That's just a little aside on how I'm getting to the ages that I'm updating you on, and why I'm only updating you on these three, because they're, one, the most important at this point in the story, and two, they're the only ones that I can really even try to figure out how old they are. So now that Mr. Earnshaw is no longer around and Hindley is the master of the house and Heathcliff is now relegated to being a servant, Hindley starts treating Heathcliff even worse than he did before. When Mr. Earnshaw was alive, Heathcliff was basically treated as one of the other children. He attended the same mass services that they did. He attended the same lessons that the children did. But now that Hindley is the master of the house, all of that stops. Heathcliff is no longer allowed to attend lessons with Kathy, though Kathy does fill him in on the things that she's learning when they have time together. So I guess he's kind of still learning stuff that way, but he no longer has actual dedicated lessons like Kathy does. One evening, Kathy and Heathcliff are out very late into the evening, and this makes Hindley upset. So he tells Nellie to lock the front door and not let them back in when they return. Nellie does what he asks and locks the front door, and then Hindley, Frances, and Joseph all go to bed, and Nellie stays up keeping an eye out for any lanterns or anything like that that come up to Wuthering Heights in the night. And she does see a lantern, so she kind of rushes outside to intercept them before they can try to enter the house and potentially wake up Hindley. And when she gets out to the lantern, she finds that it is just Heathcliff. Kathy is not with him, and she asks him where Kathy is and what were they doing. Heathcliff tells Nellie that he and Kathy were over spying on the Linton children at Thrushcross Grange. They were basically like crouched outside of a window and heard them fighting, literally fighting over a dog. Like, I'm talking each of them had a limb and they were like pulling the dog in separate directions. Insane, honestly. And just for an age check on these two, because we do have birth dates for them. At this point, Edgar would be about 15 and Isabella would be about 11. So once these two stop literally trying to pull a dog apart limb from limb, Heathcliff tells us that Edgar was weeping on one side of the room and Isabella was on the other side of the room, shrieking as if witches were running hot needles into her. And the dog was just kind of in the middle of the room, like yelping, because it was literally almost torn limb from limb by these children. So yeah, not a great start for these two. I mean, they're definitely not as bad as some of the other characters in this book, but like, not great still. After hearing and seeing this little fight that these two have, Kathy and Heathcliff start laughing, and they end up hearing the laughter from outside, and they sick a dog on them. Not the one that they just tried to tear into. He needs time to rest, but they send another dog after them. So Kathy and Heathcliff take off running, and the dog ends up getting Kathy by the ankle, and one of the Linton's butlers ends up finding them and bringing them back to the Grange to face Mr. Linton. Once they are inside, Edgar recognizes Kathy from church and points out how her ankle is bleeding from where the dog bit her. The Lintons end up keeping Kathy there to recover, and they send Heathcliff back to Wuthering Heights. They don't let him stay with her, really. So they send Heathcliff back to Wuthering Heights, and Mr. Linton tells him that he will be telling Hindley about his behavior. And before he heads back to Wuthering Heights, Heathcliff goes back to their little hiding spot that they were in before, and he just kind of spies on Kathy for a little bit to make sure that, like, she's okay and she's not, like, there against her will or something. I don't know. But once he's content with her being okay staying with the Lintons, he goes back to Wuthering Heights. Hindley finds out about this little escapade the next day, and he is furious. He is so mad. And it's only exacerbated when Mr. Linton makes a trip over to Wuthering Heights to talk to him about what a terrible job he's doing as head of house and what a bad path he is leading his family down. He does not physically beat Heathcliff this time, but he does tell him that he's no longer allowed to talk to Kathy. And if he does, he will kick him out of the house. He also tells Francis to make sure that Kathy does not speak to Heathcliff when she does return to Wuthering Heights. Kathy ends up staying with the Lintons for 5 weeks and returns home around Christmas. I don't know if it's on Christmas or just like close to Christmas, but it's Christmas nonetheless. And Nellie makes it a point to say that Kathy not only healed her ankle, but she also returned just a more pleasant person in general. It's like they taught her manners and stuff like that at the Grange. And when she does return, the first thing that she does is ask about Heathcliff. Hindley does say that Heathcliff can talk to her like the other servants do. And when Kathy sees him, she notices how dirty he is and she just starts laughing at him, which he takes very personally because he is already forming jealousy of Edgar Linton at this point, because Edgar Linton kind of represents everything that Heathcliff is not. He is very wealthy. He is a higher social rank than Heathcliff is. He's a white man with blonde hair and blue eyes. And at this point, Heathcliff is, like I said, basically a stable boy. He is very dirty. He's very unkempt. He has not been able to continue his education or anything like that. So he is feeling the ramifications of all of those things, and he does not like when Kathy laughs at him for being dirty. Since it is Christmas, as I mentioned, Nellie starts making Christmas cakes and singing Christmas carols, which Joseph does not like. Even though they are Christmas carols, he says that they're too close to actual songs. And once again, he's super religious and sees singing frivolous songs as a sin. This isn't a notable plot point at all. I just think that it's very funny how distinctly religious Joseph is. Anyways, after the whole exchange about whether Heathcliff is dirty on purpose or not, Heathcliff goes out to tend to the horses and the other animals. Nellie tries to call him in to clean up for dinner, but he refuses and just stays out, working until like 9 p.m. And when he does come into the house, he just goes straight to his room, doesn't eat dinner, doesn't talk to anybody, just goes to bed. Once he's done doing all his sulking, he comes back to Nellie and asks her to make him decent. He, I guess, is ready to take a shower and clean himself up. Nellie agrees to help him get cleaned up and get him looking his best. Says that she will have him looking so good, in fact, that even Edgar Linton won't be a match for him. And this is where we get Heathcliff's like true feelings about why he does not like Edgar right off the bat. He sees him as a threat because he's a very handsome young man. And he says, if I knocked him down 20 times, that would wouldn't make him any less handsome or me more so. I wish I had light hair and fair skin and was dressed and behaved as well and had a chance of being as rich as he will be. So yeah, like I said earlier, he sees Edgar Linton as everything that he is not. Nellie tries to tell Heathcliff that it is more important to be a good person and have a kind heart than it is to be handsome and rich. Something that Heathcliff does not take to heart. He does not think that that's true at all, apparently, based on future actions of his. But Nellie goes on trying to cheer him up by fantasizing about what his unknown past could be. She says things like, who knows, your father could have been the Emperor of China, or your mother an Indian queen. And they barely finish up their conversation before they hear noises outside and they see the Lintons approaching Wuthering Heights with Kathy and Hindley after church. Heathcliff goes to open the door for them and comes face to face with Hindley, who starts making fun of him for his long unkempt hair, and Hindley chastises him for not hiding himself away upstairs and threatens to pull his elegant locks and make them a bit longer. And this is when Edgar decides to chime in, saying that his hair is long enough, and this makes Heathcliff very angry, and he takes a pot of hot applesauce that is cooking over the hearth and throws it onto Edgar. Edgar screams out in pain, and this brings Isabella and Kathy running into the room to see what the heck is going on. Heathcliff then goes upstairs where Hindley either verbally or physically berates him. I don't really know which one, but either way, Hindley comes back downstairs a bit later and he is red with rage. So something happened upstairs. Then we cut to Kathy, Isabella, and Edgar back downstairs where Nellie is trying to help Edgar clean the applesauce off of him. And Kathy is mad at Edgar for provoking Heathcliff. She basically puts all of the blame on Edgar and says that he should not have even spoken to Heathcliff and that it's his fault that he got the applesauce thrown in his face. Way to blame the victim, Kathy. Doesn't matter if you like Heathcliff, you still shouldn't be throwing hot applesauce at people. Everyone sits down for dinner, but Kathy says that she cannot eat now because she's lost her appetite thinking about the suffering that Heathcliff is going through. And she tries to hide that fact that she's crying over this. And then it's interrupted by carolers coming to the door. So everyone goes to the front door to listen to the carolers. And Kathy says that the acoustics are better at the top of the stairs. So her and Nellie go to the top of the stairs to listen. I think Nellie just believes her, so she follows to hear the good acoustics. But then as soon as they get to the top of the stairs, Kathy starts going to the room that Heathcliff is locked in. And she can't get inside and he's not answering the door. So what she does is she shimmies out a window and kind of crawls across part of the roof and goes over to a skylight in the garret where Heathcliff is locked and slips inside to go talk to him. And after some coaxing, she does convince Heathcliff to come out of the little room that he's locked in. And Nellie takes him to the kitchen to get him some food since he did not eat dinner. And Heathcliff now tells Kathy that he wants revenge on Hindley. And we're not talking a simple eye for an eye kind of thing. He says that he does not care how long it takes. He only hopes that he can outlive Hindley so he can make his life a living hell. And he literally starts plotting his revenge on Hindley, much to the protestation of Kathy. At this point, Nellie pulls both us and Lockwood out of the story and says things like, oh, I shouldn't be talking your ear off. You're not that interested in this story. You should be getting some rest. You should be getting some sleep. But Lockwood, much like his name would suggest, and also much like me reading the story, is absolutely locked in. So he wants her to keep going. He is not ready for the story to end. Nellie agrees to stay and keep telling the story, but when she says she's going to skip ahead a couple years, Lockwood protests and says that he wants the long, drawn-out version of the history of Heathcliff. He wants to know everything that made this man the way that he is. And honestly, I can appreciate a man who is down for the long-winded gossip. He wants to know all of the dirty details, and I appreciate that, honestly. So rather than skipping ahead 3 years like she initially planned, she just skips forward to the next summer, the summer of 1778. So for an age update, that would make Hindley 21, Kathy 13, Heathcliff 14, Edgar 16, and Isabella 12, because it just says her birthday's in late 1765, so I'm assuming that she hasn't had a birthday yet, but she's 12, 13, somewhere around there. Hindley and Francis have a baby boy and name him Hareton, so now we have a distinct distinct lineage of where Hareton comes from. And shortly after the birth of Hareton, Frances falls ill with consumption or tuberculosis. And the doctors say that she will likely die of this, but both Hindley and Frances seem to think that she can pull through and that she should be better in like a week. Nellie also makes note that like up until she is on her deathbed, Frances is in fairly high spirits. But alas, Frances does end up dying from this disease, leaving Hareton without a mother, Hindley without a wife, and also just like completely wrecking any sort of happiness that Hindley had. Hindley then falls into a fairly deep depression from the grief that he is suffering from. And of course, Heathcliff loves seeing Hindley so miserable. It literally brings him joy to see the pain that Hindley is going through in this moment in time. Kathy continues her friendship with the Linton children, but she kind of presents them with a sanitized version of herself. She's always like on her best behavior when she's over at the Grange, and she's never like truly herself around them from the sounds of it. And by doing this, she gains the admiration of Isabella and the heart of her brother. And this is when Nellie makes a comment about how Kathy never defends Heathcliff when Edgar is insulting him behind his back, and she also never stands up for Edgar when Heathcliff is insulting him behind his back. She's just kind of listening to both of them talk shit about each other and then not letting either of them know, really. And that just doesn't really make sense with Kathy as a character. She's not really the type to hold back stuff to spare someone's feelings. So the fact that she just kind of lets them talk smack about each other and doesn't chime in at all is a little weird. And Nellie is right for pointing that out. Hindley ends up going away for a few days, and Kathy takes this opportunity to invite Edgar over, thinking that Heathcliff will be out working in the fields as well and that they can be alone. However, since Hindley is gone, Heathcliff doesn't want to work. He says that he has no reason to, and he says that he would rather spend time with her instead. He then notices that she's wearing some sort of silk frock, which is a lot fancier than what she wears regularly around the house. And so he asks if they're expecting any company. Kathy lies and says, no, we're not expecting anyone. Then she tries to convince him to go to work again by saying, like, you know, Joseph's going to tell Hindley that you're not out there working. And he just brushes off any of the concerns that she has because he just really wants to spend the day with her when Hindley's not there. Nellie steps in saying that she thinks that the Lintons might come by, but since it's raining, they might not end up coming by after all. Heathcliff then tells Kathy to tell Nellie that if the Lintons arrive, to just send them away and that they will spend the day together. This then turns into a full-blown argument where Heathcliff reveals that he has been tracking who Kathy is hanging out with, and he marks the calendar for every day that she hangs out with the Lintons, and he also marks it for every day that she hangs out with him. And he keeps count of how many times she hangs out with them or with him. Weirdo controlling behavior. And he says that you've hung out with the Lintons way more than you've hung out with me. It's my turn to hang out with you. And Kathy says that they basically have nothing to talk about anymore because he can't talk about the things that she's interested in, like books, because he was not able to continue his education, a fact that she is well aware of. And she basically calls him dumb. And while they are in the middle of this argument, Edgar shows up. You have the worst timing, bud, honestly. And he is just excited to be there. He is very happy that Kathy invited him over. He's expecting to have a good time, and then he walks into Kathy arguing with Heathcliff. Even after Edgar's arrival, Kathy is still upset from her argument with Heathcliff, so she is on edge and more irritable than she would normally be. Kathy then asks Nellie to leave the room so that she and Edgar can be alone. But Nellie had been told by Hindley before he left to keep an eye on Kathy and act as a chaperone for her if Edgar were to come over. So Nellie makes up excuses that she needs to clean some stuff in the room and she refuses to leave. This makes Kathy very angry. And when she thinks that Edgar is not looking, she goes over to Nellie and she pinches her arm so hard that it bruises immediately. Nellie then cries out in pain and says that she won't stand for Kathy pinching her like that. To which Kathy vehemently denies that she did anything to her at all, to try to save face with Edgar, because remember, Edgar does not know the real her. Edgar does not know that she can be very mean and violent. All of this ruckus makes little Hareton start crying. He is probably like a toddler at this point. So the loud noises and people arguing scare him, and he starts to cry. To which Kathy's response is to pick him up and just start shaking him. Edgar tries to step in to get her to calm down a little bit, and then she grabs his ear and starts pinching it really hard. So she's just lashing out at everybody at this point. Nellie takes this opportunity to grab little Hareton and leave the room, but she leaves the door open so that she can eavesdrop on what Edgar and Kathy are saying. After all of this, Edgar tries to go to leave, but then Kathy guilts him into staying by telling him that if he leaves her at this point, she will cry so hard that she will make herself sick, and it will be his fault. And this gets him to stay. It is at this point that Nellie comments that there's really no saving him, that she has him wrapped around her little finger. After a while, Nellie enters the room again to tell them that Hindley will be home soon and he will be belligerently drunk and they need to basically not be here when he comes back, unless they want him to get violent with them. At this information, Edgar leaves very quickly and Kathy runs up to her room while Nellie hides Hareton because little Hareton is scared of his dad when he is belligerently drunk. And she also hides Hindley's gun because he has a tendency to take his gun and start threatening people when he drinks too much. So she goes ahead and hides the gun. Hindley then returns to Wuthering Heights, very drunk as Nellie predicted, and he starts threatening Nellie with a knife. And as this is happening, Hareton makes the mistake of toddling into the room. And this is when Hindley tries to pick up Hareton to give him a kiss, but Hareton, being afraid of his drunken father, starts crying. This leads to Hindley getting very angry, and I'm pretty sure he drops Hareton or something like that, because this makes him sober up a little bit and he asks if Hareton's okay. And then he gets mad at Nellie for not hiding Hareton from him, being in the state that he's in. Which she did try. The kid just kind of, did what toddlers do, and he started walking around and ended up in the same room as his dad. At this point, Nellie has had enough of Hindley's BS, and she basically tells him that everyone in this house hates him. They're afraid of him. And even his own son doesn't really like him, which honestly, it's valid. He's really not doing well with the whole grief and depression thing, and he is making it everyone's problem. Hindley then pours himself another glass of brandy, to which Nellie protests. And Heathcliff says, if only he could kill himself with a drink. Nellie then takes little Hareton into the kitchen and starts trying to sing him to sleep. Kathy then comes down to the kitchen after the noises and everything settles down because she wants to speak to Nellie. There's an awkward silence where Kathy just kind of stands by the fire and Nellie's like, I haven't forgotten that you assaulted me earlier and pinched the hell out of my arm. So she is in no mood to coddle Kathy, to try to comfort her or anything like that. She is still angry at her for her actions earlier in the day. Kathy then asks Nellie where Heathcliff is, and she says that she's pretty sure he's out at the barn. In reality, he is sitting outside of the room, eavesdropping on them. It is at this point that Kathy starts to cry, and Nellie calls her self-centered, and honestly, yeah, Kathy's pretty self-centered. Kathy tells Nellie that she is very unhappy, and Nellie is just over the Earnshaw's bullshit at this point. And she says, a pity. You're hard to please. So many friends and so few cares, and you can't make yourself content. Which, honestly true. Whatever Kathy has is never enough for her. Kathy then asks Nellie if she can keep a secret, to which Nellie doesn't say that she can, but Kathy reveals anyway that Edgar had proposed to her that afternoon. Kathy asks Nellie if she should have said yes or no, to which Nellie says, I don't really know, but considering the performance you put on this afternoon, it might be wise to say no. Since he asked you after your little outburst, he must either be hopelessly stupid or a venturesome fool. It's at this point that Kathy reveals that she said yes, and Nellie's like, then why are you even asking me? If you already said yes, why are you asking me? Because it's not like you can take it back now. And Kathy just seemingly wants reassurance that she made the right decision. Nellie then asks Kathy if she actually loves Edgar and why. And Kathy names mostly superficial things. The fact that he's young, handsome, rich, and that he loves her. She does say that she enjoys his company too, but that's only after Nellie pushes her to name better reasons to want to marry him. Nellie then reminds her that being young and rich is a very temporary state of being. And in true teenager fashion, Kathy replies, saying that she's really only concerned with the now. She doesn't really care much about what's going to happen in the future. And Nellie says if that's the case, then just marry him. And she doesn't really understand where the issue is. It seems like exactly what Kathy wants. Hindley will be happy with the match. She gets to marry Edgar, move into the Grange, which, as we mentioned, is just an objectively nicer property than Wuthering Heights is. And she says that she really doesn't understand why Kathy is so unhappy. And Kathy says that she is convinced in her soul that she is wrong for saying yes. Nellie is confused as to why she's saying this and asks why she feels this way. And this is when Kathy starts revealing her secret. And we get this really good quote where Kathy says, if I were in heaven, I would be extremely miserable. And then Nellie replies with, because you are not fit to go there. All sinners would be miserable in heaven. Yeah, like I said, Nellie is so tired of her BS at this point. I think she just wants to be left alone, to be fair. She says that because of her brother, Heathcliff is now basically a servant at their house. It would degrade her to marry him. They would be destitute if they were to marry because Hindley would not support it, and they would both be cast out of Wuthering Heights and have to make their own way in life, and that's just not a good recipe for them. So I understand her concern there. But then she also goes on to talk about how if she marries Edgar, she can basically manipulate him into giving Heathcliff money so that he can get away from Hindley. So all of these reasons are logical reasons why she thinks that she can't marry Heathcliff. And this is where she says the line, he is more myself than I am. Whatever souls are made of, his and mine are the same. And Linton's is as different as a moonbeam from lightning or frost from fire. That's probably the most iconic line from this book, and it is always so romanticized, lest we forget that Nellie was just calling her a sinner, not a page before this. And she herself is basically conflicted about marrying Edgar to use him for his money when she really loves Heathcliff, without really sparing a thought of what this revelation would do to Heathcliff himself. Nellie has literally spent the last 80 pages telling us about why these two are such nightmares to be around. Yeah, your souls are the same. You're both awful. It would honestly be better if they just got married and they left everyone else alone. But that's not what happens in this book, unfortunately. There's a lot more chaos and fallout to come. This is when Nellie ends up catching a glimpse of Heathcliff outside, and she realizes that he has overheard this entire conversation. She sees him run off, but he's going in the direction of the barn, so she assumes that he's just going to sulk. And she lets Kathy finish her whole little spiel because she's not done yet. Not at all. She goes on to talk about how much she loves Heathcliff, and then she even talks about how she wants to force Edgar to be friends with Heathcliff, to which Nellie is like, what? Because with that plan, she's essentially just manipulating Edgar emotionally to get his money to help the man that she truly loves. And she also swears that if she marries Edgar, she will not let him destroy her relationship with Heathcliff. I don't know how she plans on doing that, but she is adamant that her friendship with Heathcliff will not change if she marries Edgar. Okay, girl, they hate each other, but sure, yeah, you'll get them to be friends. Okay. Nellie tells her that she doesn't really think that she's going to be able to get Edgar to do all of this with his family money for Heathcliff, and that it's a horrible reason to marry someone. Then she basically calls her plan nonsense and says that she is either ignorant with the duties that come with becoming a wife and marrying someone, or she's just a wicked, unprincipled girl. And then she says that she's not going to keep her secrets, so don't bother telling her any more of them. After this conversation, Kathy tries to find Heathcliff, and she can't find him anywhere. Nellie says that she thinks that he's in the barn, but he is nowhere to be found. This is when Nellie tells Kathy that he did overhear part of their conversation, but she's not sure where he would have gone. Kathy then takes off into the moors to search for him on foot. And the next morning, Hindley comes downstairs to find Kathy sitting in a chair in the parlor, soaking wet and cold with the doors and windows open. He asks why she's so sad and why she's wet and did not sleep the night before. And she and Nellie both stay quiet and don't really want to tell him about Heathcliff storming off the night before. But Joseph has no problem telling him. So he tells him straight out, like, yeah, Heathcliff left last night and they're both upset about it. He also takes this opportunity to, like, tattle on Kathy for, like, everything that he's seen her do, basically. So when Heathcliff and Kathy are, like, running around doing their mischievous activities, they think that they're smart enough to, like, evade Joseph's watchful gaze. But in this scene, he reveals that he, like, knows exactly what they're doing the entire time and decides that now's the time to air out their dirty laundry to Hindley. So he also spills the beans on all of the mischievous things that her and Heathcliff get up to around Wuthering Heights, and also the fact that she has been sneaking Edgar in when Hindley is not there. Hindley then remarks that Kathy looks a bit ill, and Kathy goes upstairs with Nellie, and a doctor comes by to check on her, as does Mrs. Linton. Mrs. Linton also insists that since she is now engaged to Edgar, that Kathy should come live with them at Thrushcross Grange. And Heathcliff was not seen again for years. All of my gadgets and things are dying, so we're gonna have to pick this up tomorrow and finish out this video. This is going to be such a long video. I may have to split this up into two. There's just so much going on, okay? We're like not even halfway through, but I promise things are about to pick up. They're gonna start moving quickly. I will be back in the morning to finish this out. Alrighty, friends, we are back at it again. It is the next morning. I have changed my shirt to this little cowboy frog saying, "Hold on, partner, I'm overstimulated." And honestly, that is the way these people make me feel, so it feels accurate for the second half of this video that I didn't intend on having a second half. I have also, as you probably noticed, done some moving around of the family tree because we are getting into the point where the Lintons and the Earnshaws are starting to come together. So the stopping point last night felt like a good time to do a little bit of rearranging of the family tree as well. So now we have the Lintons right here, the Earnshaws right here, and then we have the servants and Heathcliff over here. So everyone that was up on the wall yesterday is still up on the wall. I just did a little bit of rearranging so that the family trees can make a little bit more sense visually for you, hopefully. That helps. But yeah, we're just gonna jump back in. My microphone is charged, my camera's charged, my laser pointer is charged, so we should be good to continue on with this summary of Wuthering Heights. So let's just go ahead and jump back into where we were. And where we were was the summer of 1780. So in the summer of 1780, both of Edgar's parents pass away within like days of each other from a fever. And it says that Kathy and Edgar get married 3 years after Edgar's father dies. Once they get married, Kathy then moves to the Grange with Edgar, and Hindley says that Nellie should go with her, not because they have any sort of special bond or anything like that, but he says that since his wife Frances is no longer alive, he does not want any women in this house. So he basically just sends Nellie away for that reason. Although I'm pretty sure Zilla stays, so I don't know why she's allowed to stay, but Nellie's not. I don't know, but Zilla comes up later, and I'm pretty sure she's there the whole time. Nonetheless, that is Hindley's reason for sending Nellie to the Grange. And then we get kind of a sad moment from Nellie where she has to bid farewell to Hareton, who is only like 5 at the time. She has had a very special bond with Hareton. When he was really little, she basically was his surrogate mother. She took care of him as soon as Frances passed away. We know that Hindley does not really care for Hareton all that much. So Nellie was really like the person who was looking after Hareton and taking care of him. And she even makes a note of saying that, like, since that was the last time that she has spoken to him, that he probably does not remember her at all. And it's just really sad because she's literally like the only person that actually cares about this little boy. And we obviously know that Hindley's not going to step up and be a father. So basically what he does is he hires what's called a curate, which I think is like a school teacher with a religious flair from what I understand. And that's going to be who basically steps in and does the education. And I guess he's expecting them to do a lot of the heavy lifting of raising Hareton. We'll see how that turns out later. Nellie once again breaks our immersion a little bit because she notices how late it is and says that Lockwood needs to get some rest. Lockwood is down sick for the next month, and they talk about using like leeches and stuff on him, which I also think is interesting because that was a common medical practice at the time. And it is also something that does make it into the movie, but for a different character, because obviously Lockwood is not in the new Wuthering Heights movie. A lot of these characters are either not in the new Wuthering Heights movie or they are very different from the way that they are in the book. But nonetheless, I do like the reference to the use of leeches when someone is sick to balance the humors. Lockwood replies to Nellie saying that he has nothing better to do and he's bored, so he likes the entertainment. So he says he wants her to keep going with her story. And he asks her to keep going with her story up until present day. He literally wants to know, like, everything that has happened to these people from the time they were children up until he showed up at the Grange to be the new tenant. He starts trying to guess where Heathcliff gets all of his money from, but Nellie just reiterates that no one knows how Heathcliff got all of this money. He just leaves with literally nothing but the clothes on his back, and when he comes back, he is rich. I personally stand by that he became a con man and was just swindling people out of money, and there's nothing in the book that like backs that up, but there isn't anything that says that's not how he made his money, so I'm choosing to believe that that's what he did, because honestly, that fits in with who this person is. He has no empathy, no sympathy for anyone, not even himself at times, so I fully believe that he could just steal money from people and be perfectly happy about it. So Nellie gets back into the story and she starts talking about when she and Kathy moved to the Grange, when she married Edgar. And she said that Kathy behaved better than she expected her to, and that she has Edgar wrapped around her finger so tightly that she can basically manipulate him into doing whatever she wants. So much so that if Nellie or any other servant did something to make Kathy upset, Edgar would then get very upset about that. He did not like seeing Kathy unhappy, basically. And only when Kathy's unhappy. She distinctly says that he doesn't even really act the same if someone in the staff were to treat him with disrespect. So he is truly down bad for Kathy. And the quote I have written down from Nellie says, "The stab of the knife could not inflict a worse pang than he suffered seeing his lady vexed." And I do feel like we need a bit of an age check-in here. So at this point, when Edgar and Kathy get married, it is 1783, and that makes Hindley 26, Kathy 18, Edgar 21, Isabella like 17 or 18, depending on the time of year, and then Heathcliff is 19, even though he is not at the Grange or Wuthering Heights. We don't really know where he is at this point in time, but wherever he is, he's 19. Then one night, Heathcliff randomly shows up at the Grange, and Nellie does not recognize him at first because of how much he has changed since he left. She says that she only recognizes him by his eyes. Everything else about him is totally different. He is better groomed, his hair is cut, he's got nice clothes, he looks like a wealthy man. And Heathcliff tells Nellie to go to Kathy and tell her that a man from Gimmerton is here to see her. I guess he wants to surprise her after running away and being gone for 3 years, but in any case, Nellie goes to the sitting room where Kathy and Edgar and I think Isabella's there too, where they're all hanging out. And she hesitates a little bit before she tells Kathy exactly what Heathcliff told her, that a man from Gimmerton is here to see her. And Kathy gets up to go see what this man wants. Edgar then inquires a bit more about the man that's here to see her. And Nellie decides to tell him the truth and tells him that it's actually Heathcliff, that he has returned and he wants to see Kathy. And he does ask why she didn't tell Kathy it was Heathcliff in the first place. And she's like, I don't know. He told me not to tell her that. He told me to tell her it was a man from Gimmerton. Then Edgar takes this opportunity to call Heathcliff some choice names, we'll say, before Kathy comes back in the room. And she is very excited. She starts talking very excitedly to Edgar about Heathcliff's return. And Edgar is not happy. Edgar was way happier when Heathcliff just kind of ran away and was no longer in their lives. Now that he's back, Edgar's not happy about it at all. And Kathy says, I know y'all have beef or whatever, but could y'all just be friends? Like, I want you to put all that behind you and just become friends with him. Like, in my opinion, that's like asking you to befriend a literal demon. So I understand why Edgar doesn't want to do that. And Kathy says that he will join them in the parlor. Edgar doesn't really want him in the parlor, so he says, y'all can talk in the kitchen or whatever. That's a more suitable place for him. I don't really want him in my parlor. This does not please Kathy. And instead of like talking to Edgar about it, she just tells Nellie to bring in 2 tables and 4 chairs so that the 4 of them can dine together. And she says that one of the tables can be for the Lintons, who are of the upper echelons of society. And then she and Heathcliff can sit at the other table since they are of the lower orders. So she's really poking at how the Lintons, especially Edgar, see themselves as above someone like Heathcliff in a true Kathy way of just like ordering people around. So then Heathcliff enters the room, and this is where Nellie tells us like a full description of what what has changed about him. And what she says is, now fully revealed by the fire and candlelight, I was amazed more than ever to behold the transformation of Heathcliff. He had grown tall, athletic, and well-formed, beside whom my master seemed quite slender and youth-like. His upright carriage suggested the idea of his having been in the army. And I thought that that part particularly was interesting because I'm going to go on a little history tangent here. But in the 1700s in England, I think specifically with like the Royal Navy, but they may have done it with the military in general. But there was this thing called like the King's Coin. If you accepted this King's Coin, it meant that you were conscripted to serve in the Navy. So what recruiters would do is they would go into bars and pubs and they would drop these coins into tankards of unsuspecting men, so that when they finished their drink and they grabbed the coin, that was them accepting the coin, and then they would be conscripted into the Navy. And I think they may have done that in the army too. So this little line about him looking like he may have been in the army makes me wonder if Nellie suspects that maybe after he ran away, he went to like a pub or something and then he got conscripted into the Navy. There's absolutely no support for that in this book, but that's just something that I thought about when I was reading this, because it's definitely within the time period where that was happening. But once again, we don't know what actually happened to Heathcliff, so that's just speculation. But it is something I thought about when Nellie mentioned him looking like he had been in the army, so I thought I'd mention that here too, because I just think it's interesting. She goes on to say that his countenance was much older in expression and decision of feature than Mr. Linton's. It looked intelligent and retained no marks of former degradation, and a half-civilized ferocity lurked yet in the depression brows and eyes full of black fire. But it was subdued, and his manner was even dignified, quite divested of roughness, though too stern for grace. So he's looking like a respectable man. He doesn't look like graceful, and Edgar Linton has a bit more of a youthful look to him, but Heathcliff's not looking too bad at this point, and looks completely different aesthetically to what he looked like when he left. Kathy is extremely transfixed by Heathcliff and his return, and this makes Edgar very annoyed, obviously, because his wife is now ogling over her former friend / he might suspect that they were lovers at one point or something like that, at least had a little bit of a romantic relationship. In any case, the jealousy goes both ways here when it comes to Kathy. So he says that his plan with returning to the Wuthering Heights Grange area was to visit her so that he can see her face one more time before heading over to Wuthering Heights to murder Hindley and exact his revenge, or as he says, to settle my score with Hindley, and then to avoid the repercussions of the law by going into the moors and killing himself, and says that he may even still do so. And it's in this whole exchange that Kathy says the lines, "I have such faith in Linton's love that I believe I might kill him and he wouldn't wish to retaliate." Once again illustrating how down bad Edgar is for Kathy, and like she doesn't really reciprocate those feelings. Like she likes him, she may even love him honestly, but not nearly as much as he loves her. Kathy's not really fazed by Heathcliff's admission that he planned on killing her brother and then himself. I guess she's just happy that he's back. I don't know. If someone said they were planning on killing my brother, I would be a little more upset about that than she was, but they don't have the best relationship anyway, so who am I to say? But anyways, Kathy is fully on board with thinking that Heathcliff is a totally changed person and thinks that he is no longer actively plotting revenge on Hindley, which is hilarious because this man's commitment to the downfall of his enemies is honestly crazy. But in any case, Kathy sees the good in him when there is absolutely no good to be seen, and she wants to believe that he is a better person now. So Heathcliff goes back to Wuthering Heights where he starts playing cards with Hindley and some other people that are there. At this point, Hindley is a full-blown alcoholic and he is also addicted to gambling. And guess who has a lot of money and hates this man's guts? Heathcliff. So Heathcliff is more than happy to play cards with Hindley and take what little money he has not gambled away yet. And he claims that his motivations in coming back to the area, going to the Grange and all of that is to find out what Kathy's up to and stay somewhere close to the Grange so that he can visit her more easily. And he also says that it's for the love of his childhood home or whatever. Yeah, okay, sure. I don't believe that he has that kind of nostalgia, but okay, Heathcliff, we'll take your word for it for now. So Kathy and Heathcliff start meeting each other fairly regularly. Nellie says that they are on their best behavior. I don't know exactly what that means when you're like basically two adults at this point. They start seeing each other cautiously at first, but then as time goes on, they start meeting with more regular occurrence. And in his visits to the Grange, Isabella starts to develop a crush on Heathcliff. Remember, she did not like him before he left and like reinvented himself, but now that he's come back and he's rich and like well groomed, now she's into him and she thinks that he is very handsome and whatnot. And this worries Edgar because he is worried that Heathcliff would marry Isabella not because he loved her, but because of her proximity to his fortune. The way that the wills are set up and how the Grange is passed down is through the male line. So from Mr. Linton, it passed to Edgar because he was the oldest male. And from there, the Grange would pass on to any male children that Edgar has. But if he has no male children, then the Grange would pass on to any male children that Isabella has. And if Heathcliff marries Isabella and they have a son, that would make him the next in line for the Grange. We already know about Kathy Jr., but at this point, Kathy and Edgar do not have any children at all. So honestly, this is a very valid concern for Edgar to have, and he's right to be suspicious of Heathcliff because Heathcliff does have some ulterior motives for sure. But, you know, Isabella's a teenager. She's hard-headed. She is infatuated with him, and so that is why this worries Edgar. So one day when Heathcliff is over at the Grange, he, Isabella, and Kathy go on a ramble together about the property, and Isabella gets upset with Kathy because Kathy basically tells her, we don't want you to walk with us. Go somewhere else so that we can be alone. And Isabella tells Kathy that it's not necessarily the conversation that she was upset with being left out of, but the fact that she wants to spend time with Heathcliff because she loves him. She even goes so far as to say that she loves Heathcliff more than Kathy loves Edgar, which, I mean, to be fair, I'm not going to say it's a completely one-sided relationship because she does like Edgar enough, but Edgar is definitely way more into her than she is into him. So I don't know if that's like a really hard bar to pass to say that she loves Heathcliff more than Kathy loves Edgar, but nonetheless, that is what she says. This sets Kathy off, and she basically just starts telling her all of Heathcliff's bad qualities. She says that he would absolutely destroy her, specifically saying he would crush her like a sparrow's egg, and there's no way that Isabella would be able to handle Heathcliff. She goes on to say that there's no way that Heathcliff would actually love her. I think she even says that he's not really capable of love. And this is just proving that Kathy knows exactly what Heathcliff is like. Even if she pretends to see the good in him, she is well aware of all of his bad qualities, and yet she still loves him. And she goes on to say that if he were to ever marry her, it would not be because he loved her, because he is not capable of loving her, but rather it would be more likely that he would marry her just to get some of their money, and would definitely get rid of Isabella at his first convenience. Mind you, a couple pages before this, Kathy was saying that she fully believes that Heathcliff is reformed at this point. So either she doesn't believe what she's saying and she's only saying it to get Isabella to back off of Heathcliff because she wants both of her men available for her, or she just knows that this is how Heathcliff is and is using those facts to keep Isabella away. Not because she cares about Isabella, but because she does not want Heathcliff to be with anyone else. At least that's what I believe. She does say at one point that she kind of likes Isabella, but I don't think she cares about her enough to really like be telling her this for her own good. The only person that Kathy actually cares about in this book is Heathcliff, aside from herself, obviously. She also talks about how she has the ability to talk Heathcliff down when he is in one of his rageful moods, and that she can basically use him as an attack dog. Like, if she asks him to hurt someone, he will. If she asks him not to hurt someone, he won't. And I feel like she really likes having that kind of control over him. I think she just really likes being able to emotionally manipulate people because she does it a lot with Edgar, and she does it a lot with Heathcliff too. Kind of keeps stringing him along throughout most of this book, even though she is a fully married woman to a man who loves her way more than she deserves, honestly. So after this exchange, Isabella goes to Nellie really upset, and she really wants to believe that Kathy is lying about Heathcliff. So she asks Nellie, because once again, Nellie knows Heathcliff very well. And so Isabella goes to Nellie and she's like, Kathy's exaggerating, right? There's no way he's that bad. And Nellie literally tells her to just put him out of her mind and stop trying to pursue him. And she calls him a bird of bad omen. And Nellie goes on to say some very valid points and questions pertaining to Heathcliff. She questions how he got all of his money, where he's been living the past 3 years, and why on earth he would come back and willingly choose to stay at Wuthering Heights with someone who is basically his sworn enemy. Nellie also talks about how she ran into, it may have been Zilla, I can't remember, but she runs into someone who works at Wuthering Heights and she asks them about how Hindley is doing. And they tell her that he is so much worse off since Heathcliff arrived. Heathcliff is basically enabling all of his vices, getting him all of the gin that he can drink and letting him gamble to his heart's content and even loaning him more money so that he can continue gambling. Very much a bird of bad omen if I've ever seen one. Nellie also speaks to Joseph about the state of Wuthering Heights, and Joseph literally says that since Heathcliff came back to Wuthering Heights, Hindley has been in a very bad way and he is basically pushing him into an early grave by enabling all of these vices. And Nellie knows that Joseph may be a lot of things, but a liar is not one of them. And he would not say that if it were not true. So Nellie fully believes that Heathcliff is here to just wreak havoc and get his revenge on everyone who has slighted him in the past. And she would be right. That's exactly what he's doing. In trying to convince Isabella not to go after Heathcliff, Nellie just keeps naming all of these bad things about Heathcliff, kind of like Kathy did. And she says that no decent man would ever act like this, and she does not want a husband who acts like this. But this backfires, and Isabella just thinks that Nellie is working with Kathy to keep her away from Heathcliff, so she does not believe anything that either Nellie or Kathy told her, even though they were telling the truth. She is still infatuated with Heathcliff, unfortunately. Just like a teenager, am I right? You know, they seek out the advice of an adult who tries to dissuade them from making the bad decisions that they're making, and they say, screw it. I want what I want. So the next day, Edgar has to head into town, and knowing that he's going to be out of the house, Heathcliff shows up at the house pretty early in the day. He finds Isabella and Kathy sitting in the library, and upon his entry, Kathy takes this opportunity to tell Heathcliff about how much Isabella loves him, much to Isabella's dismay, because that's embarrassing. Like, what? And she literally does do it to embarrass her because she knows that Heathcliff is not into her. So she literally like grabs her by the arm and like holds her in the room while she tells Heathcliff all of the things that she said about loving him. And honestly, this is such mean girl behavior on Kathy's part. Like, she's always been like not the most pleasant person to be around, but this is like a whole nother level because she's trying to go after her mans, even though this is not the man that she's married to. And Kathy takes that as a personal offense. Isabella's able to get away and she ends up leaving the room fully embarrassed. And I think she's even crying or something like that. And when she leaves the room, Heathcliff is like, why did you tease her like that? And if any of it was actually true. Kathy tells him that it's all true. Those are all things that she actually said to her yesterday. And she has been pining over him for days. But don't worry, she filled her in on all of his worst qualities and told her to stay away. So she's done everything she could to dissuade Isabella from liking Heathcliff. Heathcliff says he doesn't even like her enough to consider being with her. But then he curiously asks about the line of succession for the Grange and the Lintons' fortune. And he asks if it's true that if Kathy has a son, if that son will be the next in line for the Grange and the wealth of the Lintons. Kathy says, yes, that's true, but if she and Edgar have a half dozen sons, then you don't got to worry about that. One of their sons will take all of the money and the land. So Kathy asks Heathcliff just to drop the whole Isabella thing, and he agrees to just leave it alone. But remember, Nellie has been watching Heathcliff very closely and been getting information from Joseph and Zilla about what's going on at Wuthering Heights. So Nellie knows that he is stirring up trouble, and she starts thinking to herself of ways that she could potentially rid both properties of Heathcliff very quietly without very much fanfare. And I have a quote written down for her, and she says, his visits were a continual nightmare to me, and I suspected to my master also. And Heathcliff is definitely a nightmare, that's for sure. So a couple days later, Nellie is out at a little guidepost that points the way between Gimmerton, Thrushcross Grange, and Wuthering Heights, and has a feeling that she should probably check on Hindley and Wuthering Heights while she's out. And as she's on her way over there, she spots a little 5-year-old boy, and she realizes that this 5-year-old boy is Hareton. He's just like out wandering around on his own. No one is with him out there. And she tries to talk to him, but as she suspected, he does not really remember her. He is also not the sweet little boy that she left. He starts cussing her out, and when she asks him who taught him those words, he says that it was Heathcliff, and he really likes Heathcliff because I guess he sees Heathcliff as like the fun guy in the house. I mean, his dad's pretty awful, and then the only other people there are Joseph and Scylla. So I guess for a 5-year-old child who doesn't know any better, the man who teaches you cuss words is the fun one in the house. But this does not mean that Heathcliff likes Hareton. Heathcliff hates Hareton so much just for being the son of his sworn enemy. And this is when Hareton reveals to Nellie that Hindley really has nothing to do with him. And Hareton even calls Hindley Devil Daddy and tells us that he much prefers Heathcliff. Heathcliff has also sent away the curate that Hindley hired for Hareton, so he's also not getting any education anymore. And he just kind of runs amok around the property doing whatever he wants, including running around the moors on his own, which, as we've mentioned before, not the safest place for an adult to be, let alone a 5-year-old child. You may be wondering, how does Hindley feel about all of this? Hindley is in such a state at this point, he's like belligerently drunk most of the time, that he doesn't really know what's going on around him. So he, I don't think, is even aware of the things that are going on with Hareton, what Heathcliff is doing. All he cares about is the fact that he has his alcohol and he has his money to gamble. Meanwhile, Heathcliff is starting to feed into Isabella's infatuation with him and is starting to try to woo her into marriage. And from what I remember, he doesn't really lay it on super thick. He doesn't like straight up lie to her about loving her. He's just a little bit nicer to her than he normally would be. And she absolutely eats that up. But as we've mentioned before, his motivations are not for love or anything like that. His motivations have to do with her brother. He is angry at her brother for, one, making fun of him and laughing at him when he was a stable boy, essentially. And he is also mad at him for marrying Kathy. And the way that Heathcliff likes to get back at his enemies is to make someone that they care about suffer immensely. So in Edgar's case, this is going to be Isabella. In Hindley's case, he takes it out on Hareton, but also Hindley is so vulnerable when he returns as well that he can also just take it out on him directly by literally funding and enabling his demise. And while Heathcliff is visiting Isabella one day, Edgar has some pretty choice words for Heathcliff. He tells Heathcliff that his presence is a moral poison that would contaminate the most virtuous. So yeah, he really does not like Heathcliff. And he has good reason to. He is on the money with all of his suspicions. So honestly, good for Edgar in that sense. Edgar then tells Heathcliff that he is no longer welcome at the Grange. This makes Kathy very angry, as you would expect. And it also upsets Isabella, but Kathy is like livid. And Heathcliff shoots back at Edgar, calling him a wimp and saying that he is basically just a lamb of Kathy. And then Kathy and Heathcliff both start making fun of Edgar and saying that he is weak. Edgar then throat punches Heathcliff and walks out of the room. This makes Heathcliff very angry. Kathy tries to get Heathcliff to leave, but Heathcliff says that if he doesn't return the favor now, he's going to end up killing Edgar later. So if she does care about him at all, she should let him get a punch in to spare his life later. Kathy then says that he will probably come back with backup and a gun. Heathcliff says that he wants to crush Edgar's ribs like a rotten hazelnut. And then they see Edgar returning with backup, and Heathcliff is like, you know what? Yeah, maybe I should just leave. And he leaves the Grange. Edgar returns and then he gives Kathy an ultimatum. It's either me or Heathcliff. You gotta choose one. He literally says you can't be his friend and also be mine. You have to choose. And Kathy, in order to get out of making this decision, feigns an illness. And even though Nellie tells Edgar that she's faking it, he believes that she is sick, so he backs off of his ultimatum and lets her just rest. So Edgar leaves Kathy alone, and then he goes and tries to talk some sense into Isabella about her desire to pursue Heathcliff. And he tells her that if she continues a relationship with Heathcliff, she will lose him as a brother. And he is like dead serious about that. And it's at this point that Nellie comments that she feels like she is the only sane person living at the Grange, and honestly, that is so valid. Then Kathy's once fake illness does turn into a real illness, and she starts refusing food and hallucinating. She also gets so sickly in appearance that her own reflection in a mirror frightens her, and she thinks that her room is haunted. This all goes on for about 3 days before Edgar finds out, and then he gets very mad at Nellie for not taking her illness seriously and sends her to go get Mr. Kenneth, who is like the local doctor. As Nellie is on her way to go to Gimmerton to get Mr. Kenneth, as she's walking by the stables, she sees something white and moving as if it is alive, hanging on one of the bridle hooks, which is a hook where you put the bridle for a horse, obviously. I don't know why I explained that, but she gets closer and she realizes that it is actually Isabella's dog Fanny that someone hung on this bridle hook. I don't know how exactly it was hung on the hook. It doesn't really say, but any way of doing that is horrible, and she says as much because she is shocked when she sees that it is an alive dog that is hanging off of this hook, and she quickly gets the dog down and says that she had seen the dog follow Isabella upstairs into her room the night before, so she's very confused as to how this dog got out here and how it ended up hanging on this hook. And also, who is depraved enough to do this to a little Cocker Spaniel? Or is it a Springer Spaniel? I don't know. They just say a Spaniel. But in any case, to do this to a little dog, that is so horrible. Like, we don't tolerate animal abuse in this house. Not at all. I step on a dog's tail on accident and I'm apologizing profusely. Gee, I wonder who on this wall is evil enough to do something like that to a little dog. I wonder. So after freeing the dog from the hook that it's hanging on, Nellie then makes it to the town. She gets to Mr. Kenneth, and while talking to him, Mr. Kenneth tells Nellie that he saw Heathcliff and Isabella walking together, and Heathcliff was trying to convince Isabella to run away with him. And though she did not accept at that point in time when Mr. Kenneth was overhearing them, she did say that she would be ready to go on their next meeting. And he tells Nellie to let Edgar know to be on the lookout because Heathcliff is up to his Heathcliff shenanigans again. And this instills Nellie with a new set of fears. Nellie goes back to the Grange and immediately goes up to Isabella's room, and it is empty. But Edgar's already mad at her for not taking Kathy's illness seriously enough. So she decides that she doesn't want to be the one to tell Edgar, so she just kind of like pretends that she doesn't know. And then the next morning, one of the maids goes into Isabella's room and notices that she's gone and starts freaking out, and that's how Edgar finds out that Isabella is gone. The maid then tells Edgar that Isabella ran off with Heathcliff, and he's like, how the heck do you know that? And she tells him that it is basically all over Gimmerton, that is what's happened. She said that there is gossip that a man and a lady had stopped to get a horseshoe fastened in the middle of the night. The man was identified as Heathcliff, and the lady had on a cloak that kind of hid her face, but she went to drink some water and it slid back a little bit, and people were able to recognize her as Isabella. So pretty much everyone in Gimmerton knows that these two have run off together. Edgar is honestly pretty calm about this, and he basically just says, well, she's made her choice and she's lost me as a brother as a result. So he is basically done with Isabella at this point. Then we fast forward a little bit. Heathcliff and Isabella have now been gone for 2 months, and Kathy is finally overcoming her illness, and she is able to leave her room for the first time in a while. Edgar, the ever-loving husband, has been tending to her day and night, sitting by her bedside, making sure that she is okay. And it's at this point that Kathy prophesizes her death, saying, next spring, you will long again to have me under this roof, and you'll look back and think that you were happy today. So that's a super ominous thing to say to your husband after you were down sick for 2 months, once he thinks you're in the clear. So Kathy is relaxing in the parlor, and Nellie takes this opportunity to tell us that she is also pregnant, and that Isabella had written to Edgar about 6 weeks after leaving, announcing that she was married to Heathcliff, but on the bottom of the note, in very faint pencil, was an obscure apology to him saying that she couldn't help herself, but now that she is married to Heathcliff, she really has no way to get away from him. And this is where we're going to take another little historical break so I can tell you a bit about what she means by that. So at this point, it is 1784. And in 1784, the only way that a woman could seek a separation from her husband is if she could prove in court, which is very expensive, that her husband had either deserted her or was extremely cruel. And I'm not talking about like, you know, abusive. I'm talking about like he tried to kill me and I somehow survived. And of course, those are things that are very difficult to definitively prove in a court of law. And when you add on top of that the high expenses of even taking a separation case to court, it's just not something that many women were able to do. Which means that now that Isabella is legally married to Heathcliff, unless he does something extreme, there is no way for her to get out of this marriage. She is now bonded to him for life. Pretty much immediately, Isabella realizes the mistake she made and that she is now trapped with Heathcliff. Edgar does not respond to this letter, but Nellie ends up receiving a letter from Isabella about 2 weeks after this. She says that it sounds very odd coming from someone who should be in the newlywed honeymoon phase, and she ends up reading the letter to Lockwood. In it, Isabella says that she arrived at Wuthering Heights and heard of Kathy's illness, anonymous. And since she cannot write to Kathy and her brother won't speak to her directly, Nellie is the only person that she can write a letter to at the Grange. She asks Nellie to tell Edgar that she would give the world to see his face again and that she misses him in the Grange very much, but she is not allowed to return. She then says that she has 2 questions for Nellie. The first one being, how did you contrive to preserve the common sympathies of human nature when you resided here? I cannot recognize any sentiment which those around me share with me. And the second being, is Mr. Heathcliff a man? If so, is he mad? And if not, is he the devil? I shan't tell my reasons for making this inquiry, but I beseech you to explain, if you can, what I have married. And then she asks Nellie to come visit her at Wuthering Heights sometime very soon. So, like, right off the bat, Isabella is like, who the hell did I marry? What the heck is wrong with him? And as I've mentioned, Wuthering Heights is not nearly as nice of an estate as the Grange is. It especially is not very nice now because Hindley is the master of the house and he kind of lets it go into disrepair because he doesn't really care about anything other than drinking and gambling. So Isabella's not feeling very confident in her decisions at this point in time. She goes on in the letter to tell Nellie more about what happened when she arrived at Wuthering Heights. Basically, everyone is awful to her as soon as she arrives. She is very much used to the way that things work at the Grange, where they have the servants who, you know, do whatever she wants them to do, and they're not ever like rude to her or anything like that. And she is in for a sharp turn when she meets Joseph, who is very rude to her upon their first meeting. And then she also meets Hareton, who, as we've mentioned, is not really the most polite boy and loves to use a cuss word. So Isabella's a little shocked, shall we say, about her greeting at Wuthering Heights. She also encounters Hindley, who is very unkempt. He is completely disheveled. He has really long hair and ghostly eyes. And the only way she knows who he is because she recognizes his eyes as being similar to Kathy's. And that's how she knows that they're brother and sister. And the demeanor of the people at Wuthering Heights in combination with the lack of care put into maintaining the house make her uneasy and long for the Grange, which makes sense, honestly. I wouldn't want to be at the Heights right now either. She says that the 4 miles between the Grange and Wuthering Heights feels more like an ocean because they feel so far away. Then as she is like trying to get settled in, Hindley basically tells her to get Joseph to show her to Heathcliff's room. And he is adamant that whenever she's in that room, she needs to lock the door. And he like begs her, don't forget to lock the door if you're in there. Because what Hindley likes to do when he is extremely drunk is get his gun that he like jimmy rigged. It's a weird gun. It says that it has like a spring knife on top of it. So I'm picturing like a pistol that's also like trying to be a bayonet, you know? But anyways, he takes this gun every night when he's drunk and he goes and he tries to get into Heathcliff's room with the hope that one night he will forget to lock the door and he can go in there and kill him. And that is why he tells her that she needs to lock the door if she's in there, because if he gets into that room, he's killing somebody. What a warm welcome to her new home, right? So after this exchange, Isabella goes and finds Joseph and they're like trying to find a place for her to eat a meal because everyone at Wuthering Heights like eats in the kitchen. And Isabella thinks that she's too good for that. She doesn't want to eat in the kitchen where like Joseph and Hareton eat. So she starts wandering around the room looking for a place where she can eat her food. She's like carrying a tray. And then it gets to a point where she just has like a complete breakdown. She like throws the tray on the floor and just starts weeping at the top of the stairs. Then a bulldog comes over to try to comfort her, as well as eating her spilled food that fell on the floor. But that ruckus gets Hindley's attention. And everyone in the hallway like scatters when they hear Hindley coming. And when he enters the hallway, it's only Isabella and the dog that are still there. And he kicks the dog down the stairs and Isabella runs away. And she ends up finding shelter in Hareton's room where she falls asleep on a chair because she's just like exhausted. And honestly, that's fair after the day that she's had. And she is later awoken by Heathcliff and he's like, why are you sleeping in this chair? And she tells him that she was going to try to get into their room, but he has the key and the door is locked, so she could not get in there. This makes Heathcliff very angry because she had the audacity to call it our room. He starts saying like, the room is not yours, it never will be yours. And he starts just like verbally berating her for having the audacity to think that she would share a room with her husband. He says a bunch of things to her that she says she doesn't feel comfortable repeating in a letter to Nellie, but she does say, I assure you, a tiger or venomous serpent could not rouse terror in me, equal to that which he awakens. He then goes on to inform Isabella about Kathy's illness, because Kathy's still sick at this point, which Heathcliff blames on Edgar, and by extension, Isabella. And because he sees Kathy's illness as Edgar's fault directly, he vows to make Isabella's life an absolute living hell in order to get back at her brother for causing Kathy's illness in his mind. Basically saying that Isabella will be a proxy for Edgar's suffering until he's able to get his hands on Edgar directly. Isabella then ends her letter to Nellie by saying, "I do hate him. I am wretched. I have been a fool. Beware of uttering one breath of this to anyone at the Grange. I shall expect you every day. Don't disappoint me." After reading this letter, Nellie then tries to get Edgar to write to his sister, thinking that it will make her feel better at least. And he refuses. Edgar says that Isabella has chosen her side and that he will not correspond with anyone associated with Heathcliff. He will not go to Wuthering Heights, and no one in his family will go to Wuthering Heights either. So he is like completely disowned Isabella at this point. Nellie then heads over to Wuthering Heights to visit Isabella as she promised. And on the way, she's like trying to think of a way to tell her that her brother does not want to talk to her or see her anymore in the most gentle way that she can. And upon arriving, Nellie notices that Heathcliff is the only person in the house that looks well. She says that Isabella's hair is uncurled and she's wearing like a rumpled dress from the day before. But Heathcliff looks like the picture of a gentleman. He is just truly thriving off of the chaos and misery that he is causing to the people around him. Nellie tries to be discreet, but Heathcliff notices that she looks like she has something to give or say to Isabella, and he tells her just to go ahead and say it, that they don't have any secrets between them. So she relays Edgar's message as gently as she possibly can, saying that it is probably best for everyone involved if they just do not have communication anymore. This makes Isabella's lip quiver. She's clearly upset by this, which, you know, makes sense. And Heathcliff wastes no time. He just immediately starts asking about Kathy. So he is like not even hiding his disdain for Isabella and love for Kathy to anyone at this point. Heathcliff then starts talking to Nellie about how he really wants to kill Edgar. Mind you, I'm pretty sure Isabella's still in the room, so she's hearing all of this. But yeah, he just starts talking about how badly he wants to murder Edgar. But he only resists because he's afraid that if he kills Edgar, it would make Kathy sad, and he doesn't want to make Kathy sad. And he says that that's literally the only thing stopping him by saying, "The moment her regard ceased, I would have torn his heart out and drank his blood." This man is literally bloodthirsty. He goes on this long rant about how Edgar couldn't love Isabella in 80 years more than he could love her in a single day. And again, Isabella's still right there. His wife is sitting in the room with him as he's talking about how much he loves her sister-in-law. Nellie then tells Heathcliff that he should probably employ another maid or something like that because Isabella is used to living a more cushy, luxurious lifestyle, and she gave all of that up just to be with him, so he should, you know, be a little nice and make her life a little bit more comfortable and like it was at the Grange. And he takes this opportunity to be like, well, she hates me now. She knows exactly what I am. Why would I start doing that now? He says that her fantasy image of him has completely dissolved. He says that he doesn't care for her or her happiness, calls her a disgrace to the Linton family, and now she's stuck with him anyway, so why would he change what he's doing at this point? And all of this, his treatment of Isabella, his general cruelty, is all in an effort to get back at Edgar. He tells Nellie that the whole love affair between them was completely one-sided. He never felt anything for her, and he doesn't really care who knows it at this point. He also claims that she knew exactly who he was from the very beginning, because if you remember that dog I was talking about earlier, this is when Heathcliff tells Nellie that not only is he the one that hung up her dog like that, but she was there and she saw him do that, and she still wanted to marry him after that. He says, "The first thing that she saw me do on coming out of the Grange was to hang up her little dog, and when she pleaded for it, the first words I uttered were a wish that I had hanged every being belonging to her, except for one. Possibly, she took this exception for herself, but no brutality disgusted her. I suppose she has an innate admiration of it, if only her precious person were secure from injury." He goes on to say more horrible things about Isabella and talks about how he likes tormenting her and that he treats her poorly to see what she can endure endure while still coming back to him. But he makes sure not to go too far so that she has grounds for a separation case. So he's really like towing the line of what is legally acceptable abuse at this point in history for a husband to inflict onto a wife. And Isabella's just kind of trapped there in this hellscape of a house with this evil ass man. And before she leaves, Isabella asks Nellie not to tell her brother what Heathcliff has said, because she knows that he is partly saying all of these inflammatory things in hopes that they get back to Edgar, and Edgar comes over to Wuthering Heights, at which point Heathcliff will either just beat the absolute shit out of him, or he will just murder him straight up, like he's been fantasizing about doing for the last couple pages in the book. And Isabella says that she would rather die than have that happen. Heathcliff then tries to convince Nellie to sneak him into the Grange when Edgar is out of the house so that he can see Kathy alone. Nellie refuses, saying that the surprise of his visit will only make her health worse. And he gives her a choice. Either she helps him or he will keep her at Wuthering Heights and go see Kathy on his own. This is where Nellie once again breaks the narrative structure and talks directly to Lockwood again, saying that after much convincing, she agrees to take a letter to Kathy and says she will let him know when Edgar is away, as well as all of the servants, so that they can meet alone. And that's the end of volume 1. I'm going to keep going until where the movie cuts off, and then we'll probably have to split this into 2 videos because I've already been filming for like 4 hours. So this is going to be a very long Wuthering Heights recap, but there's a lot of stuff that happens and I don't really want to glaze over some of the details because they all work together to make me hate this man as much as I do. So I really want you to be there in the trenches with me as I talk more about all of the stuff that this guy does, because he is nowhere near done at this point. So Nellie keeps her word. Heathcliff returns to the Grange when no one else is home to see Kathy, and upon seeing her, he realizes that she is dying and she won't recover from the illness that she has. And he starts to like monologue and lament and anguish over her. Kathy, on her deathbed, blames Edgar and Heathcliff for her death, and she has like this whole speech about how his life is going to be once she's gone, talking about him going on without her and raising children, and how when he's on his deathbed, is he actually going to be excited to see her in the afterlife, or is he going to be more sad about leaving his children? And basically just saying that once she is dead, his love for her will fade into obscurity. They both hear Edgar approaching, and Heathcliff goes to leave because he knows that he's not supposed to be there. But Kathy begs him to stay, so he does decide to stay. Nellie tries to talk some sense into him because remember, she's the one that let Heathcliff know that Edgar was not in the house. So it's really kind of her fault that he's here to begin with, even though he threatened to imprison her in his house if she did not comply. But in any case, she's trying to convince Heathcliff to leave, saying that Edgar will be very angry and you'll be in a lot of trouble if you don't leave now. While they're having this argument, Edgar hears it as he's entering the house and he rushes into the room, and all of this excitement makes Kathy pass out. Because of her state and her suddenly passing out, this worries Edgar. He's no longer really concerned about Heathcliff being there. He's more concerned about what's happening to his wife, and he kind of just drops their quarrels for now and just focuses on caring for Kathy. They get her semi-stabilized, but she's still unconscious, and Nellie basically tells Heathcliff, you need to leave, you need to go home. And he refuses to go back to Wuthering Heights. Instead, he says that he will wait in the garden under a tree. Mind you, it's pouring rain, so he's just gonna stand out in the rain and wait for an update on what's going on with Kathy. So he kind of just hangs out in the yard for a while, sitting under a tree in the pouring rain, waiting for Nellie to give him an update on what's going on with Kathy. Later that same night, around midnight, Kathy ends up giving birth to Kathy Jr., who we met at the beginning of this book. And then around 2 a.m., Kathy ends up passing away. She never regains consciousness, so the last exchange that she had with Heathcliff was basically her blaming him for her death. Nellie then goes outside to inform Heathcliff that Kathy has passed away. She herself is very distraught. She is crying and she lets him know that she did not make it through the night. Nellie starts to say things like, she's gone to heaven, we will meet again someday, but Heathcliff's having none of this. And this is where he has his whole speech about like begging Kathy's ghost to haunt him in the afterlife. He says things like, you say I murdered you, then haunt me. Murder victims often haunt the people that murder them. So haunt me, come to me in any form. I don't care how you do it, just don't leave me alone in this world. And he says the famous words, I cannot live without my life. I cannot live without my soul. And this is the point in the movie that a lot of people start crying. But having read the book a couple times, I have absolutely no sympathy for this man whatsoever. So I did not shed a single tear in the movie theater. Even though Jacob Elordi gave a great performance, he was very sincere in his emotional delivery. I can't feel sympathy for this man. I cannot. So that is where the movie ends, and I think that's where I'm going to end this part 1 of this Wuthering Heights recap. This has taken a lot longer to go through than I ever anticipated, so I'm so sorry. I was totally planning on having this just be one long video, but I don't want to post a 5-hour video in one shot, so we're going to divide this up and we're going to do part 2, which is most of volume 2 and all of the things that happen after the movie itself cuts off another time. But just to talk about the movie itself for a little bit, because I feel like this is a good stopping point to make some comments on the movie since this is where the movie ends. I'm going to block Lockwood while I'm talking about this because he's not even in the movie. Overall, I did enjoy watching the movie. I thought it was very visually well done. I thought the visuals were really cool. I really enjoyed the use of color in the movie. And it wasn't as bad as I was expecting based on all of the things I was seeing online that people were saying about it. Like, yes, there are obviously qualms that I have with the movie adaptation of the book, but it is like so different from the book that like it's hard to even like actually call it an adaptation because a lot of the stuff that I just talked about with all of these people does not happen in the book. Like, if we want to just talk about characters that aren't in the movie, Mrs. Earnshaw isn't in it, Hindley isn't in it, which means Frances isn't in it, nor is Hareton. Mr. and Mrs. Linton aren't in it. As I mentioned, Lockwood is not in it. Kathy Jr. is not in it. So literally half of the characters on this wall are not in the movie at all. And that's why I have a hard time talking about it as if it was supposed to be a straight adaptation of the book, because clearly it wasn't. Half of these characters aren't even in the movies. A lot of the characters that aren't in the movie are mashed together with characters that are. Plot points are like jumbled around and applied to different characters. And it's just so different that I feel like it should have been marketed as a retelling rather than an adaptation. And I feel like that's why I was able to go in and kind of just like take it for what it is and judge it based on that, rather than being like, well, this is wrong and this is wrong and they didn't do this, but they did this instead. It's just so different. But as far as the movie itself goes, I did really enjoy the visual references to other films like Gone with the Wind. And overall, the movie was very entertaining. It had me locked in for the full 2.5 hours that I was watching it, but it's just a really bad adaptation of the book. Not saying that the story itself is not intriguing or whatever. It's just not Wuthering Heights. It's just not. So like in the movie, they combine Mr. Earnshaw and Hindley together into one character. They make the father the abusive gambler that gambles away the family's entire fortune. That means that Kathy is the only child of the Earnshaws. So Heathcliff is literally like her brother and her best friend growing up. The Lintons are also a lot older. Well, at least Edgar is a lot older in the film. Kathy is too. They aged up all of the characters in the movie. Like I believe Kathy is supposed to be anywhere between 25 and 35 in the movie, whereas in the book she dies at the age of 18, so she never even reaches her 20s. Edgar's described as like a bachelor and he has like gray patches in his hair, so I assume that he's supposed to be like in his 30s as well. I don't know how old Isabella is supposed to be. She kind of has like that childish look about her in the movie almost, so I can't believe that she's supposed to be a bit younger, and I believe Heathcliff is supposed to be like around the same age as Kathy because they look like they're about the same age in the childhood shots. They also changed Joseph from a very old religious man to a young dude who has a sexual relationship with Zilla. And that's funny to me just because he is like explicitly described as a very old man in the book. And he's also super religious. So like Joseph in the book would hate Joseph in the movie. They did Nellie so dirty in the movie. They really made her seem like she was the main person keeping Heathcliff and Kathy apart. When in the book, she's just trying to keep up with whatever the heck they're doing and trying to like minimize the fallout and damage from whatever Heathcliff is up to. Like she doesn't burn letters that Heathcliff tries to send Kathy. She does tell Kathy that Heathcliff overheard her when she was doing her whole rant about why she can't marry him. And there's never really a point where Kathy turns on her like she does in the movie. Nellie is more so like the consistent person that has been there through everything. And that's why she's our narrator. And I also just really like her as a character. So like the way that they portrayed her in the movie low-key made me kind of upset because because I love Nellie. Nellie is like my favorite character in this book, and they did her so dirty in the movie. Speaking of doing people dirty, they also did Isabella dirty because they turned all of the abuse that she suffers from in the book that she is distinctly not into. They turn it into like a kink for her. Like she's low-key kind of into Heathcliff's abusive behavior towards her in the movie. And in the book, it is not like that at all. She is vehemently warned about how evil Heathcliff can be, but she is a naive teenager and she is blinded by what she thinks is love for Heathcliff. So she ignores all of the advice from Nellie and even Kathy against marrying Heathcliff and does it anyway. There is not a scene where he tells her that he's just going to use her or whatever he does in the movie. I know there's like a whole scene where he's like, I'm not going to be able to love you. Do you consent? I'm not going to treat you well. Do you consent? That does not happen in the book. He basically just downplays how evil he is until it's too late for her to get away. And then she's just trapped with him. And I know that the whole like Nellie keeping them apart and Isabella low-key being into the abuse and the father being the one that gambled away all of their money and drank himself to death. Those are all things that are supposed to make you feel worse for Kathy and Heathcliff and want to like root for them as characters when they are blatantly unlikable main characters. But it didn't work on me. Probably because I just know too much about these characters. But if you've seen the movie and you have not read the book, please let me know if you felt sympathy for these two people in the end, because I did not, but that could just be because I know how awful they are in the book, so it's hard for me to feel bad for them. In the book, the Earnshaws are not as wealthy as the Lintons, but the Earnshaws don't become like broke and destitute until Hindley's gambling problem. And because they combined these two characters, it really does make more sense as to why Kathy wants to marry Edgar and why she can't marry Heathcliff, because they really will be destitute in the movie if she does marry him, because not only does her family not have any money, but he doesn't either. So really marrying Edgar is like her ticket out of poverty in the movie. And then of course there's the whitewashing of Heathcliff and all of that stuff that has been all over social media. I don't need to rehash that for you, but as we've talked about, Heathcliff is a brown man of some sort. They really can't tell brown people apart in this book. We don't know where he's from. We just know that he is a brown man and that is quite central to the book. So yeah, we also have the whitewashing of Heathcliff, Kathy being aged up into an almost spinstery character, as well as characters like Isabella and Nellie being made to be more complicit in both Heathcliff's shenanigans and keeping these two separated. There were also like smaller changes that they made, like in the movie, Kathy's the one that gives Heathcliff the name Heathcliff for her dead brother, when in the book it was Mr. Earnshaw that named him that. They have Kathy teach Heathcliff to read when that's really something that happens later between these two. So there are like smaller plot changes like that as well, but that's not really anything that I'm that upset about. I feel like the best way to go in watching the Wuthering Heights movie, if you have read the book, is just treat it like a retelling. Don't treat it like it's an adaptation. Treat it like it's inspired by Wuthering Heights. But if you go in expecting this book, you're going to be very disappointed, because that is not what happens at all in the movie. Though there is a lot more sex in the movie, being that there is literally no sex happening in this book. There are babies, but there's no talk of like any sexy times or anything like that, because once again, it was written during the Victorian era, and the Victorians were notoriously very reserved, we'll say. But yeah, that is my part one of this Unhinged Wuthering Heights recap. I still have about 15 pages of notes to talk you through. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this video edited and posted, and then I will just hop back into finishing up telling you what happens in the second half of this book that just doesn't make it into any movie, apparently. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it came out okay. This is a very different kind of video for me. So this is an adventure for both of us. I would like to try to do more plot summary videos like this in the future, especially for books that are being turned into movies that I've read before. So if this is something that you enjoyed that you would like to see more of, let me know. I like taking my time talking through the plots of these movies and telling you like all of the details of the things that happen. As I've learned from this endeavor, that does end up making the video a lot longer than I thought it would be. So let me know if you like this long form, in-depth plot summary type video, and I can maybe do some more of them in the future. I do want to do one about the Odyssey, but I feel like that's going to be a lot harder to do because there's just so many characters and there's a lot of stuff that happens in the Odyssey. I do have several months before that movie comes out, so maybe if I start working on it like next week, I can get it done by the time the movie comes out. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and leave a like down below. Let me know. You should also subscribe while you're down there so you can see when I put up part 2 of this video and tell you all of the things that happen in the second half of this book. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!